Good evening, colleague and board member Wong. And I just saw Miss Levy, but she left. You're muted, Mr. Wong. Ah, hello, board member Levy. Hi, attorney. Oh, you're muted, Miss Love.
How's that?
Perfect. And board member Wong, you're still muted. But can I hear you?
That's because I'm in the boardroom and I use the speaker here. Is that all right?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I thought that was it, but I just wanted to be sure because I don't want you to miss a thing. All right, we have a minute
comment
yet. We're a pleasant bunch, aren't we, Attorney Love?
Always.
Hi, Dr. Keyser.
Hello. Happy afternoon.
Yeah, rainy afternoon, gloomy. Oh, well, my clock is chiming 5. So, Michelle or Miss Shope, are you here?
I am.
Okay. Then I'm calling the Policy and Personnel meeting to order. It is 5 o'clock. Michelle, may I have roll call, please?
Wong,
Present.
Levy,
Here.
Jacobs.
Here.
All members are present with Wong in the boardroom.
May I have approval of the agenda? Oh, that was a nice little musical note.
That was me.
Oh, was it? And I love music, so that's all good. I'm sorry, so may I have approval of the agenda? So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the agenda. Any discussion? Questions? All right, hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. May I have approval of the March 9th, 2021 minutes? So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for the approval of the March 9th, 2021 minutes. Questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the March 9th, 2021 minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The motion of the minutes passes. And we are on our items for discussion/action. And tonight we have Mr. Beard with us.
Hello, everyone. How are we doing?
Well, good evening, Mr. Beard.
Good evening.
I will hand it over to you for your presentation.
All right. Let me see if I can get this going here.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, no problem at all. Especially since it's raining out, delays that time for me getting wet. So.
Right.
Okay. Should be. There we go. Okay. Everybody good? We can see that?
Yes. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for having me here this evening to talk about this, the scope of our head coach role, to give you some background on what our responsibilities for our head coaches are and for our coaches in general. So we'll jump right into it. Our first slide here are the head coaching responsibilities, and these come straight out of the job description. They oversee the training of athletes in all events. I'll just summarize these instead of reading all through them. Overseeing home events and meets and all those things that come with it. That doesn't necessarily pertain to every sport, but track, swimming, that pertains to that. Attend and coach all practices and all meets. Messed that up there. There we go. Demonstrate ability to plan, organize, and supervise the team with respect to schedules, equipment, student eligibility, officials, and safety. That's a big issue there that we stress with our coaches. Demonstrate ability to work positively with a diverse population of student athletes, ability to integrate the program into the total school experience of the student athlete. The roles that we ask them to play, assist other coaches in enforcing team policies. So we do ask them to be a little bit of a mentor to their assistant coaches and to provide that guidance for them with their team policies and the athletic department policies. Responsible for providing student athletes feedback about their performance related to their disposition, behavior, and team skills. That's almost a daily thing with our coaches. The student athletes definitely want to know where they're at and how they're doing. Manage the program budget and organize fundraising efforts for the program. The coaches primarily manage their fundraising budget, and they also organize their fundraising efforts. I help them with the budget for their individual programs and sports on the yearly basis, but they maintain their 21 account, which is their fundraising effort. They help coordinate the competitions and practice schedules with myself. I send out contracts to the different schools, but they contact the other coaches at other schools and put their schedules together. They do a great job of doing that. Coordinating youth sports with the athletic director. This is something that is evolving. We're getting better with this role, and as an athletic department, we need to define that a little bit more and provide a good structure for that to happen. The off-season training and conditioning programs are is another area that they're very heavily involved. Attend booster club meetings. We haven't had a booster club, an overall athletic booster club, for about 2 years now of getting up and going. So we have not had any booster club meetings this year. Completion of the required WIA rules exam. This is a requirement of the WIA and from me to make sure that we know all the rules that, because they're always changing, and we keep current our certification with CPR and AED. We have a current running list of everyone's certification dates and when they need to be renewed, and competitive experience in athletics at the high school level. The differences in the sports and coaches, there's really 4 differences. So we have the length of season. We have the number of competitions, which include Saturdays. The roles and responsibilities between the coaches vary a little bit depending on the sport. And then there's years of experience and longevity. We have a wide variety of coaches that have been here this will be their first year, and some coaches who have been here 30 plus years. Some of the challenge of our coaches' pay scale is not really consistent with the increases across all sports based off of years of experience. You'll notice that at the 7-year mark, there's a big difference in certain sports than others. The intermediate versus the high school. When it comes time time spent coaching and responsibilities at the intermediate level, our seasons are typically 6 weeks. At the high school, our seasons could be from anywhere from 10 weeks up to 16 weeks. And so that is not necessarily reflective in our coaches' pay. And then we have a lot of personnel turnover too. So because of our coaches' pay, that is a big reason. So what do we do moving forward, and what do we do now? I suggest we honor the pay scale as it is for the rest of the 2021 school year, and to continue to work through the inequities of our current pay scale to make them more equitable across all sports and activities. And moving forward, I've put in some work developing a pay scale for both coaches and advisors. I'm putting it in now using a consistent method to apply to all current positions and future positions, developing an equitable pay scale for coaches and advisors to be used starting in August 2021. We have a great start on this as far as the athletic side, and doing a little bit more research for the advisor side, because that's changed a little bit more recently. So I'm working through that as well. But this is a great opportunity for us to attract teachers and coaches and advisors to the district. it's something that's always changing, especially on the coach's side. But when teachers want to be involved in extracurricular activities, having a well thought out way to compensate them really helps to attract them to those opportunities. And it's also an opportunity to keep great coaches and advisors and teachers involved in extracurricular activities. This is important because it's hard to find coaches and it's hard to find advisors that are really solid human beings and individuals and are great for our students and engaging our students and helping prepare them for the future. So it's a very important part of our student athletes' lives, and having the right people in those positions is vital. So that is my presentation for tonight, and I will take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Beard. Committee members, questions? Yes, Board Member Levy.
Good evening, Mr. Beard. Thank you for joining us. So I have a twofold concern. One, the district dealt with a coaching issue just about a year ago, and it was centered around pay equity and who's eligible for pay, et cetera. So I'm a little disappointed that we're finding ourselves, no fault of, I don't want you to believe that I'm pinning this on you. But I am disappointed that we are having conversations like this a year later is my initial concern. And my second concern is that unless I'm wrong, it seems like the recommendation of the presentation is that even though an inequity has been identified, just please ignore it and let's move on, and we will address it at some point in the near future. And that makes me very uncomfortable. I'm also unclear as to, thank you for the information that was attached. So with the pay from similar areas or close to us, but my issue is I don't want to make decisions just because someone else is doing it or because boards have done it in the past, and I still don't have a clear understanding. There is a significant difference in the pay, but I am not seeing a significant difference in the responsibility that would justify that pay. So those are my concerns.
Yeah, and I can definitely address a couple of them, I believe, and at least I can attempt to try. When it comes to the inequity of our pay scale, I have to agree that it is something that we need to address sooner than later. And I would say that a lot of that work has been completed on the athletic side, and then should be completed on the activity side as well. So my recommendation is that the job was advertised as the way that it is right now. And for the coach that is in that position or any other position right now, there's an understanding of what that pay will be. And if we prolong that decision to pay them or not pay them or whatever that gray area might be right now, I'm afraid that I might lose them as coaches. In particular, in the position that we're talking about right now, that season's they were beginning their first preparation for their first football game this Friday. So I hate to lose a coach at this point in time because of that. So that is where I would recommend that we continue with what we have right now with the plan of having something different by August 2021. Also in the way that our scale is right now, we've had a lot of turnover in different positions that affect coming up with a new pay scale. So that has delayed a new scale as well. Yeah, I'm assuming, Joanne, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I would like to just be able to speak to why it's being addressed a year later, and that Joel has put in significant work in trying to identify those inequities in the length of seasons and the amount of time invested. He and I have met on a few occasions now to talk about those, and those are part of the budget building process, but new addendum schedules were not prepared for 2021. They were, as the pandemic and all of these things, those meetings didn't take place. And I have to be honest with that this is where we are, and he has the athletics set up to look at addressing all of that inequity. We just want to make sure that we are looking at the activities and the advisor side as well. So he is well on his plan, and it is addressing all of those inequities to make sure that we're recognizing all of the coaches. The issue that you were talking of was a different type of employee group and coaching. That was an inequity there, and that was addressed last year.
Board Member Wong?
Thank you, Mr. Beard, for the presentation. A couple of questions. First of all, and this might be a question for Attorney Love. If we were to, do we run into any legal problems potentially if we were to adjust the contract for this given year, considering we advertised it at a certain rate? And then the second question is, since we've delayed these adjustments, is it safe to say, or can we expect to see changes for the 2021-2022 school year?
Yes, I would say yes, we will expect to see that for the 21-22 school year.
And in terms of addressing a change in the compensation, if there is already a contract that's been entered into, it would depend on the terms of that contract, whether you could modify the salary. If the contract has been entered into and it has been accepted, then you wouldn't likely be able to change the salary. If there is no contract, you advertised it at that amount, and now you're extending a contract at a different amount, the employee would have the option of saying he or she is not going to enter into the contract under those terms because that wasn't what was advertised. But advertising is simply an offer, and until you have the agreement on the terms, you're likely able to modify that.
Thank you, Attorney Love. Board Member Levy, and then I'm going to jump in after her, if that's all right.
Just a little bit of clarification. Attorney Love, thank you for that perspective. That was really helpful. Just in the process of the way we do things, because I am not interested in the board being a rubber stamp for decisions that have already been made. And I am just curious, did no one else notice the pay inequity, and why would that be advertised before it was presented to the board so we could kind of flush out if there was an issue there? And then my question for clarification is, and I appreciate that it looks like you all are on track to propose some changes for the 2021-2022 school year. The contracts that or one, is there a contract? And two, what is the time frame? Because I completely agree, it is not fair to the person who's in the position at all through no fault of their own. What is the period of that? Is that going to run past these new proposals that you'll be making? Because I think in the presentation it said basically to stay the course until the end of the 2020-2021 school year. Well, that's June. Was that the intention, or was that the wrong language to have in?
I think that would be the intention right now, because our current spring coaches are under the assumption of what their pay will be for this year. We have a lot of returning coaches for the spring, and that will conclude our 2021 school year. And so that was my thought process. was to finish out this year and then address the inequities moving forward for 2021-22. I'm not sure if I answered your question, so I will defer to anyone that could help Board Member Levy with that question.
No, that was great. So for the football season, that started when and it will end when? Just so I'll have a scope of what time period that amount is for.
Well, this year's a different year with the COVID, so it's usually a fall season sport, but this year it started March 8th, and it will go through April, I believe 30th. Yes, April 30th will be our last scheduled game, but they will have one more week after that, so technically it will go to March 8th, or May 8th, sorry, May 8th.
And is the scope of the role that there's also a youth program that the head coach participates with?
Yes. Right at this time, they usually do not run in the spring, and we're not having any middle school sports at this time. So none of our coaches are really involved with the youth programs at this moment.
So Stephanie, this is my final comment. Thank you for being patient. So just
Sure.
a little quick math, that's like $1,700 a week for that contract.
Yes, usually football is 11 weeks long. The WIA shortened it this year to, I believe they shortened it to 8 weeks because they moved it from the fall to the spring, and they shortened the winter season to fit in our fall sports. And then they also pushed our spring sports later into June. So everything is condensed right now with the fall sports. So it does tip the scales one way when you look at it that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, wow. I'm really glad that we're looking at this because that's a lot of money when you, Board Member Levy, when you put it out there that way. So I do have a piggyback question on the salaries. So I guess I'm a little confused. I thought HR set salaries, but I'm hearing, Mr. Beard, you're doing it?
These are, sorry to jump in, these are addendums, not salaries. So these are annual addendums that get put onto, if the person is an employee, their salary. And then also to give context, we use a salary schedule for our employees, and for our addendums, we use the same methodology. So once a addendum schedule has been created, we follow that until there's a change to that. And in this case, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Beard, this addendum schedule has been in place since 2014, 2015.
That sounds about right, yes.
And my apologies, Dr. Kieser. I meant to say addendums. And I thought so then it's changed because the addendum schedule I remember was built upon years of experience, and that's no longer the case, or is that different for different addendums?
No, that is the case. It is built off of years of experience. It is used to determine where a coach would fall on that scale.
And addendums are chosen by the principals, correct? Or is it still done the way where people show an interest, and if just one person shows an interest, that addendum is awarded to that person?
Well, for the activities, yes, they have to express an interest, and they have to work through the principal and myself to secure those. I work with our principal to secure advisors for our activities. And
Okay.
they vary, yes.
And that's at all of the grade levels, right, Mr. Beard?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then I had a question about the Booster Club. So please forgive my ignorance regarding sports. I'm not a sports girl. But the Booster Club, is that not an organization of parents to do fundraising for athletics?
Well, it is in some ways that booster clubs can be different. They can have different types of members. Our current booster club is more of community people as opposed to parents. And we started this booster club. It's called the Night Club, I would say 2 years ago. We've been slow to get started with this year not having any activity with our booster club. So there's also sports that have individual booster clubs that are run by parents, and they do a lot of the fundraising for their individual sports. So sports like hockey, band has its own individual booster club. They do a lot of things, and that's a lot of parents. Baseball has one, softball has stuff. So there's different sports that have booster clubs as well.
Okay, and thank you for that explanation, because I just learned some things new. So thank you, Mr. Beard. And I get it hasn't been active this past year with COVID. That makes perfect sense. Yes, Mr. Wong.
Okay, so we know the seasons this year are modified and shortened. And since we haven't had any in-school instruction yet, and we scheduled to for the fourth term, do we have certain expectations for not just our football coach, but also all coaches out there as far as the roles and responsibilities for the rest of the year? Because I think it would be nice to know that, yes, I mean, are they keeping track of the kids' grades? Are they doing, what else are they doing besides just the 8 weeks of practice and games?
Okay, yes, thanks for the question. Our coaches are definitely involved, especially on the grade side. We've been running grades every 2 weeks, I should say that every week, on Fridays, to make sure that our students have been getting back engaged with their classrooms while they're participating in sports and activities. So what we'll be doing, our winter sports was extremely short. So we're going to incorporate them into our spring season so that we keep that connection with coach and student athlete, and they're still being engaged that way from all angles. So they will definitely be involved this year with open gyms and open pools and open mats along with the spring season. So at some point in time here in the next couple of weeks, we will have pretty much every sport engaged, from our fall sports that are closing out in the middle of April to our spring sports starting in the middle of April, overlap with our winter sports that didn't get an opportunity to do very much. So a lot of that activity is off the court, off the field, all those things, staying engaged. We send out a grade report every single Friday to our coaches, and our students have been connecting with their teachers to make plans to increase their grades. So if they do not do that, then they're not allowed to participate in activities for the next week. And that has been definitely positive for our grades, and the number of failures that we have has significantly dropped during this time.
And I guess I don't want the focus to be so much on the students, because that obviously is a responsibility for the students themselves. What I'm focusing on is the additional duties and responsibilities of the coaches. And, especially in the shortened year, to make sure that, are they doing the job that is asked of them? And is there an evaluation process to make sure of that?
Yes, I do evaluate all our coaches. We have our end of the season meetings, and I keep that in our system of coach evaluator, and they are consistently evaluated. I do step watching practices and all those types of things for our coaches. I also am requiring them to do a little bit more professional development. So we've gotten into the Positive Coach Alliance. We have an agreement with them. So there's some professional development where we're taking part in seminars and all those types of things. So we have monthly head coach meetings. We just had one yesterday. And so we are staying active as possible to try to, I am trying to stay active with them to better our knowledge as coaches and to keep them engaged as well. So we are definitely working trending in a positive direction with that, as far as our coaches learning, continually learning, and getting better as coaches, and also keeping engaged with our student athletes, even though it's not during their regular season.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Beard? All right. Mr. Beard, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us this evening.
Oh, thanks for having me. I enjoyed talking with you.
Absolutely. Okay. Have a great evening.
Thanks. You too.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. That leads us now to personnel items. And we have the March 23rd, 2021 employment recommendations, exhibits A and B.
I move approval of employee recommendation A to the full board.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve the March 23rd, 2021 employment recommendations, exhibit A's and B. Any questions or discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor of approving the March 23rd, 2021?
Point of clarification.
Yes.
I thought I heard Board Member Levy say Exhibit A.
Oh, not B? Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't catch that. And thank you, Ms. Show.
I just need to clarify
right.
if it was A only or if it's A and B.
No, that's fine. And then you second, and Board Member Wong, you're okay with the A only?
Yes, we can separate them.
Okay. I'm sorry. Thank you. All right. Can I try this again, Ms. Show?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, Board Member Levy. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the March 23rd, 2021 employment recommendations, Exhibit A. Any questions or discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and all opposed? All right, so the March 23rd, 2021 employment recommendations, Exhibit A passes. So that leaves us with Exhibit B.
So I'll break the silence. I hate the position that this is putting the candidate in for the head football coach. But the question that I've asked all along, which I still don't, in my opinion, have a reasonable answer to, is I can see the difference in pay, but I'm not seeing the difference in job responsibility, and I'm not comfortable with an inequity being identified, but the recommendation is to go with things the way they are, and we'll address it at a later date. So that's not something that I can support.
Thank you, Board Member Levy. Attorney Love, may I ask a question again?
Certainly.
Okay, so if I was understanding the conversation earlier, at this I'm sorry, my mic went mute. So if I understood the earlier conversation, contractually, legally, there's nothing we can do at this point in regard to the current contracts for this school year, correct?
Without reviewing the contract, I mean, unless there's language in the contract that allows you to terminate or modify the contract, if you've signed a contract providing for a specific salary, then
Okay.
that would be the salary the employee would be entitled to.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Attorney Love. Board Member Levy, then Board Member Wong, and then Dr. Kieser. You all hit at the same time.
Can we get clarification if there is a contract, and then if there is, this is just a request for a future date, that we look at the process, because if contracts are already being extended and they've been accepted by the party, they just haven't been signed, and then they're coming to the board for approval, I think that's putting the cart before the horse. So one, could we just verify, is there a contract?
And I think Ms. Williams can answer that. my understanding is there's a verbal agreement pending board review. That's how the contracts are extended. Am I speaking of that correctly, Ms. Williams?
That's correct. Yeah, we haven't released the contract yet. We were waiting for board approval before releasing that. So essentially, we do have an employee who is fulfilling the scope of the role without signing off on that contract because we haven't released it yet.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Board Member Wong?
So if we're not under a contract, there's nothing that's going to that would prevent us from rewriting a new contract to bring the pay down to a level that's going to be at least equal to the other major head coaches, whether it's or I should say basketball, baseball, and hockey.
My understanding would be that the board could do that. My concern is that we, and in part, Board Member Levy, this is an attempt to address the question you have been asking, and I believe that we established a salary schedule for these addendums, or I should say an addendum schedule for these addendums, in part that we would not get into the minutia of individuals trying to negotiate the contracts and be able to say, I like you, so therefore you should have X dollars. I'm skeptical of you, even though you have the exact same qualifications and tenure, and so you should get this. It was an attempt to bring a level playing field to the process and take the subjectivity out of it. The fact that this has not been reviewed in 6-7 years is not in fault to Mr. Beard's attempt to try to get this updated, but for this year, we've started down this path, and so I worry that if we break that practice and make those adjustments, we're entering in a whole new phase of coaches and advisors saying, I find it inequitable, and so I want the board to weigh in and adjust my addendum schedule because we've done it for this one particular person. I feel we open up that avenue of discussion to bring more things to the board and have the board supersede an addendum schedule that's currently in place. I would encourage us to hold ourselves to the timetable that Mr. Beard has laid in front of us to say, this is the last year this committee and this full board, if approved, will see this salary schedule or addendum schedule, I apologize. You will see and be able to provide feedback on a new addendum schedule that incorporates both athletics and activities, which are currently kind of two separate documents.
Board Member Wong, did you want to weigh in with an opinion? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I guess I did.
Board Member Levy was next in line. She had a question.
Oh, I apologize, Board Member Levy. Please.
Board Member Jacobs, you are fine. I don't have a question. I just have a comment. And I will be brief because I'm repeating myself, which I'm not a fan of doing. I am just very disappointed that it sounds like the recommendation is, thank you for identifying an inequity. Let's roll with it and fix it at a future date. So I wanted to, again, express my disappointment. And yeah, this might complicate the situation, but I would rather do things that are fair and complicated than easy and inequitable.
Thank you, Board Member Levy. Board Member Wong, did you want to say anything?
Well, I'd like to see us come to some type of resolution that's going to be, but it's not going to be fair and equitable. We can obviously see that at this point, unless we pass it on for this year and kick the can down the road, which I would agree is not, with Board Member Levy, it's not the appropriate thing to do, but we are in a situation here that, how do we address this? And I guess that's the question, is how do we make it fair? Because I did receive some calls regarding this issue from other coaches that feel as though it was inequitable, going back to the days of the Bernie Barkins, the Heinekes, and individuals like that where all the coaches were paid the same. And then suddenly the addendum in 2015 kind of threw all that out of whack because some person wanted to buy a coach. But I guess that's neither here nor there. I'd like to find a resolution, and I don't think it's fair to the individual that's involved in this as well. I mean, obviously they're caught in the circumstances of this. So, but we do have a football season upon us. I don't know. I mean, I think that I can go both ways on it, but I think that if we could make an adjustment on the contract to make it fair for at least to compare the other coaches, if you look at our current schedule, that'd be $6,500. That to me would be more palatable than the 10 grand.
Thank you, Board Member Wong, and I agree with both of you, and there have been, and this is an opportunity to right, in my opinion, to right some wrongs that have been done for years. It's not reflective on anyone that is presently attending this meeting. And I do feel for the person that's in that position as well. But if we do not have a contract for this individual and we can change the amount of money the person's receiving, I know it's messy, but I think that's what we should do. And I just feel we need to start somewhere. And if, Board Member Wong, you've received calls from other coaches about the inequities of it, I think that's something we need to take in consideration. And Dr. Kieser, I certainly respect where you're coming from as well, but boy, that's just a lot of money. A lot of money. And it's just an odd situation we're finding ourselves in with COVID.
I don't disagree that it's an odd situation, and it is certainly a difficult one. I too don't want to repeat myself, but I will simply state that I feel that it opens up a situation for more requests for the board to review and supersede established schedules that are out there, and that is not in any way an acknowledgement or a moving a problem down the road. We need to do both, and unfortunately we're not in a position to do a both and at this point. So we have to pick one that we're going to address up front first. And so if it's to adjust, the motion needs to include what is the proposed addendum for the head coaching position, and Ms. Williams and Mr. Beer will have to go back to the individual and offer that to that individual to either accept or not accept that.
Dr. Kieser, can you clarify for me? I'm not clear on that you're afraid that this might set a precedent for the remainder of this year for the other addendums?
Correct. If there are other sports that are being paid less than, we are okaying the adjustment of a accepted and established salary schedule, which we all agree needs to be adjusted and modernized to be more equitable across both athletics and activities and clubs. But by making that adjustment in the moment, if there's an individual who feels that their upcoming addendum that has not been released yet is not equitable to their point of view, we've opened up the door for a request to have that be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. That's my concern.
Okay, thank you. Do you or Mrs. Armstrong have any idea how many addendums might be coming forward yet? I guess I was under the understanding that they all were done at the same time, but that's not what I'm hearing.
No, the addendums are released when the season starts. So in Mr. Beard's presentation, he has the addendum schedule for athletics. He did not attach the addendum schedule for all the clubs and activities, and put in comparisons with neighboring or nearby districts.
Okay, thank you. Well, this is not an easy one. Yes, Mr. Wong.
I think Board Member Levy was before me.
Oh, for Pete's sake. Really, I'm not doing this on purpose, Board Member Levy. Go for it.
I know you're not, Board Member. So here's my question, and we're all adults, so I'm just going to say it straight out. Dr. Kieser, how comfortable are you in the efficacy of the schedule? Because I am becoming nervous, and this is why. For me, the only obvious outlier was this $10,000 request for the head football coach. The other head coaches range, and I don't have all of it in front of me, so forgive me, from like 1,600. So I think like the highest was like the one we're looking at tonight, just over 3,600. But they were all within that range. But I'm hoping that you have faith in your schedule that you can justify. No, we offered you this because when we combine years of experience with requirements of this role, etc., that is why this offer was made. But your comment is making me nervous that you may not have faith in the schedule to kind of back up the offers that were made. And the question that I asked, like I said, I still haven't gotten a response that made sense to me as to why this was so much of an outlier. So are you saying that the concerns I have with this matching up with the head football coach, do you have concerns about that for other coaching positions?
Sorry, I was muted there. When this was brought to my attention, I have concerns that there is a sport that was adjusted significantly compared to the other sports in whole. I believe that the underlying belief that developed the addendum schedule, was built on good faith and trust. My concern is that if we as a group are willing to make adjustments based on this, what is the justification for someone bringing forward a request to say, I really feel that the work that I do, it matches up almost point by point and level of roles and responsibilities to some other position that is at a higher spot. I think we open ourselves up to saying we are setting aside the schedule. We will use that as our starting point, but if people are not happy with that, they can negotiate and have an avenue for doing that. I feel that as part of our work and our equity work moving forward, we have work that started. It has not been brought to the board for formal review and feedback and put to replace this. So that's my concern. I don't think that the conversation around adjusting this particular one, because it's the only outlier compared to the others, I worry about what this one decision could have for other ones. So I have not done my research to see what this was prior to it being moved to this $10,000 spot. That would be something that I would feel more comfortable saying prior to it being adjusted to 10,000, this is what it would have been. And so then we have a historical underpinning that is grounded in the philosophy behind what the schedule was originally designed for, if that makes sense.
It does, and thank you for sharing your position on it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard you say is that you believe the schedule was created in good faith. I want a schedule that's created in math. Like, I want a formula. You have this many years of experience, you have this responsibility, because then we don't have to worry about emotions playing a part in it. Like, I want to depend on math and not good faith. That doesn't particularly help us in this situation. But yeah, we can't always replicate good faith, but you can pretty much replicate math.
I don't disagree with that, and I believe that there was math behind how the schedule was created originally, but I don't have that historical background to speak to that.
Board Member Wong.
As I'm looking at the attachment that was included, I mean, there's really, and Dr. Kieser, is your concern is specifically for the remainder of this year, correct?
Only the remainder of this year, because I have my assurance from Mr. Beard that he is going to be presenting before August a different schedule that encompasses more than just athletics, but athletics and activities and clubs altogether.
So of the contracts that are out there, have all of them been signed for all of the sports that are scheduled to be played this spring?
My understanding is that the spring addendums have not been released yet because the seasons have not started. Ms. Williams, am I speaking correctly?
Yeah, that's correct.
So any sport that hasn't begun, there's not a contract out there, and potentially that's what your concern is that those could come forward and ask for adjustments.
I think we open up that opportunity for individuals to make that request of this committee.
Because as we look at, and now since we don't have an activities schedule, correct?
We do have an activities addendum.
But the sports one, you know, when you look this over, it is when you look it over, you can look at it sport by sport. And it is very obvious that there's only two numbers that really stand out. I mean, as you look it over. So I think that that's something that like I said, you don't have to be a mathematician to figure that one out. How we address those this year, I don't know. I mean, I think that, but this is definitely an outlier since it is significantly above the rest. I don't know. I guess I'm not convinced that making this one change is going to have a snowball effect upon all of them, since there's only one other number that maybe might cause a problem.
And Dr. Kieser, even if we would open up a can of worms, there quotes, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, as a board, we don't have to agree to any going forward if anyone else comes forward if we don't feel that it's inequitable, correct?
Absolutely. And in part, I believe the work that we are doing right now is the board's work. It is the responsibility of this committee to review and to ultimately make a recommendation to the full board that it feels is in the best interest of the district. And that isn't to say that every request that comes before the board gets approved. It is just a perspective that I felt needed to be aired publicly so that we were making the best informed decision possible. But if you're asking me, is there a line in the sand here? No, there is no line in the sand that we're creating by making a motion and making an adjustment.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kieser. Are we ready for a motion?
Mr. Beard has his hand raised.
Yes. Yes, if you don't mind, I would like to add, maybe it could help clear up a couple things.
Yes, please.
Board Member Levy brought up a point about math, because I can appreciate math. I love math. So if you look at our scale, I could probably share it, but if you look at the different numbers starting from 0, working all the way up to the 6th year of experience, there's some sports that are consistent, and then at that 7th year, it jumps up to a certain amount against different sports. What I believe Dr. Kieser is referring to is if you look at a sport other than football, and you look at, for example, swimming is on the same line as football from the 1st year, 2nd year, all the way up until you get to the 7th year. Then there's a big, huge jump and a big difference. But if you look at soccer and you look at softball, you have the same numbers all the way up till you get to 7th year, and then you have another jump. One for soccer is at 5,000, but for softball is at 3,871. So they're consistent all the way up to the 7th year, and then there's a big difference in what that 7th year looks like. And that's the inequities that we're looking at that could come back to, you have to adjust these just like you have to adjust football. So I just wanted to add that piece to it because it's throughout, the inequity is throughout the entire scale. It's not just football and compared to the other sports. So I just wanted to add that little piece.
Thank you, Mr. Beer, for that input. Well, if my understanding of Robert's rules, which I love so much, is correct, I really should not be the one to make a motion.
I put a question mark in the chat.
Oh, for Pete's sake. How many times am I going to say that, Board Member Levy?
Thank you, Board Member Jacobs. All right, this is going to sound crazy, but that might just be what I do. And I have a feeling I may not understand the magnitude of what I'm about to request. So please help me shape this request. How much work, and is it feasible to come back with all the head coaches, since no contracts have been signed yet, and you all take a closer look? Dr. Kieser, you can review that schedule, you and your team, and we reshape those numbers and come back so that there is equity before we start releasing addendums and saying, hey, this is our offer, will you accept it? How much work did I just ask you to do?
It would, one, I don't know how much work that would all entail. I will say that the winter sports addendums have already been released, so those sports have already been paid. So there's only one winter sport addendum that is out there that will be coming next month. But right now, I believe all of the winter sports except for one, and then all of the fall sports, with the exception of this one position, are also have been paid. So we would only be talking about the spring sports and this one position moving for the remainder of this year.
So let me ask you this. With Exhibit B, would that wrap up all of our spring addendums, or are there more spring addendums to come?
All of the spring sports, this one position would wrap up all of the alternate fall sports addendums. We would still have spring coming.
Okay. Is it possible, you know what, I will submit my question to the chair because it's not on the agenda. So I move that we accept Exhibit B with the removal of the head football coach, and I am hopeful that the team is able to craft a number that's more in line and bring that back to us for our April 6th meeting. So my formal motion is I move that we approve Exhibit B onto the full board with the removal of the head football coach position.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to move on to the full board, Exhibit B, with the exception of the head coach position. Any questions or discussion?
We might need to specify football because there's more than one head coach position.
Thank you. So there's been a motion and a second to move Exhibit B forward to the full board for approval with the exception of the football head coach position. Are there any questions or discussion?
I have one question. So of the list of sports, what sports has there not been an addendum for as of yet? Just so I'm clear. I guess you said all the fall sports and the winter sports have.
Point of order, we got to keep the discussion to the motion on the floor.
No, that's correct, Mr. Wong, or Board Member Wong.
Okay, I'll remove
Any
it.
other?
That's fine.
I'm sorry?
No, it's fine.
Okay, so any other questions or discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay. All opposed? None. So the motion carries. So we are now on
Thank you.
to... Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Beard. All right, we are now on to policies for first reading. And first up, we have Policy 522.8, Dress Code for District Employees. And Attorney Love recommends either deleting the entire policy and using the language in the employee handbook, or keeping the first paragraph and deleting the remaining policy language and using it in the employee handbook. The changes in the first paragraph were submitted by Ms. Williams, our Director of Human Resources. Okay, I'm looking at the chat box. I don't see any hands raised. While you two are pondering this, I personally am in favor of keeping the first paragraph in policy, and if I'm understanding that correctly, and then using it in the employee handbook. I just personally feel very strongly about the dress code, and I think it sends a stronger message if we have a policy as well as details in the employee handbook.
There was a question that Board Member Levy had put in there in terms of the determination of disruptive, and my recommendation would be that it would be part of the employee handbook task force to clarify that language so that we would be clear as to how we define disruptive and what would that constitute.
Dr. Kieser, wouldn't that, and perhaps I'm not understanding it correctly, Board Member Levy asked who determines? Wouldn't that be the building principal or the immediate supervisor? Board Member Levy, please correct me if I'm misspeaking for your comment.
No. And I'm looking at this from a cultural lens. So if I am a Black woman wearing my natural hair and it raises to the sky, what if someone thinks that is disruptive? So who makes that determination? And I am not comfortable with the language well, let me ask this. What is meant by the term disruptive? And maybe that'll clear some things up, but that language just does not sit well with me.
Dr. Kieser?
No, and that's exactly the mindset that I had in mind when in trying to clarify what is meant by disruptive and who is disruptive. So Ms. Williams has started a handbook task force that is diverse in nature, so that conversation could be had. So when we think about the lenses by which we evaluate our policy and our practices, we need to have multiple perspectives and voices at the table, so that we can remove ambiguity and be as clear as we possibly can.
Thank you, Dr. Kieser, and thank you, Board Member Levy. I was looking at it a tad bit too simplistic. I was thinking in my head, if an employee wore an offensive term or slogan on their shirt, for example. So this goes much deeper. So, and then I like that. And you or Ms. Williams, could you describe the task force a little bit? That sounds really intriguing.
Yeah, absolutely. So about a month ago, we had a kickoff meeting to develop a staff handbook work group. And so historically, the staff handbook, the language, the content, that was driven a lot by HR and then union representatives for those employee groups. And so what we did is to really drive the inclusion in the workplace and making sure that we're using language that fosters diversity, equity, and inclusion. We grew that staff handbook work group to include all employee groups. So each employee group has representatives. And in our kickoff meeting, we talked about, this is where we see like our end product. It would be a product that we could use for recruitment. It would be a mechanism that gives our employees a voice in a process that drives our retention efforts. And at the end of the day, everybody really understands, the expectations of what we're doing here in the workplace that ultimately supports like our mission, our vision, our values. So we had our kickoff meeting, and then this week we've completed 3 meetings with 3 different employee groups, and we're hoping to complete all of them this week. So we've met with the secretarial group, we've met with the admin group, and we've met with admin support. So we still have yet to meet with like our professional educators, and I'm sorry, I know we have like our OTs, our PTs, so we have a few more meetings to move through. And so we've actually been getting really great feedback. In fact, today, we did talk a little bit about the dress code, and to Board Member Levy's point, yes, absolutely. Like, you do think about cultural things, and hair is one of those. We also talk about gender neutral language in our handbook, and the way that the policy had been written before, it really like delineated between our male staff and our female staff. And so really kind of using that gender neutral language, and not only that, but like fostering gender neutral language for our dress, you know, that's driving our inclusion in the workplace. So we are having conversations, and with this being a process where we have employee representation, we're able to get that feedback from groups. And to like Board Member Levy's point, that was brought up with one of the groups as well. So we're using all of that feedback, and next week we'll have a good working draft. The employee groups will then get a more solid draft of that staff handbook. They'll take it back to their colleagues for them to take another look at it, another chance for them to provide feedback after all the formatting is done and some of the suggestions and feedback is used. And then it'll go to Dr. Keyser in legal to vet for final approval. So that's the work we've been doing for that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Board Member Wong.
What's the selection process for the committee members?
Good question. So I sent out an email to the whole entire staff and basically asked if people were interested in being part of this group. And so I was actually able to select everybody that showed interest. So we have about 20-some people on the group.
And how do we assure that going forward that we have the proper diversity to represent our student body? I mean, in that committee, because if obviously that committee is going to be instrumental in developing the handbook.
Yep. So I asked for diversity specifically in the email that I had sent out to gain interest. So we have women, we have people of color, we have people part of the LGBTQ community. We have, I feel like I got a great representation in terms of diversity. And when I wasn't getting diversity, I was asking administrators, you know, help me get some representation from this group, and I was able to. And I do have a list, and I'd be willing to share that with anybody.
I'm going to interject a minute, Ms. Williams. Mr. Beard, if you're still with us, did you have a question? Okay, that must be old. Thank you, Dr. Keyser. I haven't been doing a stellar job tonight with keeping up, so. Board members, any other comments or questions?
Just my old one, that I'm not comfortable with grooming being referred to as disruptive. Unless someone is not grooming, I don't know how your grooming can be disruptive.
I do want to say that I think some of this language might have been part of the policy before. I'd have to look at it. I'm just picking this up again for the first time in a long time.
You know, in light of what I said with my earlier comment, my own personal opinion, I'm changing it now listening to the discussion that's been had. And I don't know if it's appropriate to share. at this time before my other two colleagues have spoken, but I'm almost leaning more toward now deleting the policy and putting the language in the employee handbook. What are other thoughts?
In rereading that last sentence, I think the spirit of the policy, if it ends with the roles, employees to serve as role models for students and present a positive professional image, period, and then eliminate that full last sentence. I think that encapsulates the essence that as adults we represent, or we set as role models for the students that we serve.
Board Member Wong, did you want to say something?
I guess I would tend to agree with that, just because it doesn't muddy the water with that last sentence. And then it drives everything to the handbook, which if we have the committee there and that's being managed properly by HR, I think that would be sufficient to cover the needs for the dress code and doesn't make it so that the board gets, I guess, deep in the weeds in this area.
Thank you, Board Member Wong. So Dr. Kieser, just so I'm understanding, that would be the only sentence in the policy?
We would strike the last sentence of that first paragraph. So the last sentence beginning with the Board of Education recognizes, strike that. Because I agree with the conversation that it does set up a deficit mindset where you are presenting exactly what Board Member Levy, mode of dressing, grooming, as a negative connotation that does have specific cultural and even gender specific values that we want to, that's what we want to eliminate, and we want to be more equitable. So striking that, I think, moves us closer in the direction that we want to move as a district.
But then we still have the grooming mentioned in the very first sentence, right? Or could we change, or could we say the Board of Education?
Yes, we could take that out as well, correct.
Could we just say, well, that's why I was wondering if we would just have the one sentence, or could we say the Board of Education expects all district employees to exercise appropriate judgment with regard to personal appearance and dress, period?
There you go.
And then it is the responsibility of all employees to serve as role models for students and present a positive professional image. Board Member Levy?
You just covered it. I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. That's clear.
So we just have those two sentences. Could Ms. Sho, would you be so kind as to read that back for us? Are you ready?
Yes, I just want to clarify one thing. We're also removing the portion of the first sentence that says, in a manner which inspires respect from students, parents, peers, and the public.
Yes.
Okay. So it would say, the Board of Education expects all district employees to exercise appropriate judgment with regard to personal appearance and dress. It is the responsibility of all employees to serve as role models for students and present a positive professional image.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Sho.
You're welcome.
I move to recommend to the full Board of Education approval of the revision as just stated and lay over the policy 522.8 dress code for district employees for first reading and recommend that the administration consider or delete the language. Wait, hold on a second here.
I think you covered it with the first half.
Yeah, end it with for the first reading.
Second.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second to pass on to the full board dress code for district employees, policy 522.8 with the revisions just stated. Are there any questions or discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? All right, it passes. Thank you. We are now on to policy 523.2, employees occupationally exposed to blood-borne pathogens. We have a recommendation from Attorney Love and Ms. Williams to recommend deleting the specifics and moving them to the employee handbook.
Board Member Jacobs, I don't see that comment.
Oh, under rationale? The last sentence?
Looking at the policy.
Oh, and I'm looking at the, not the policy itself, I'm looking at where it says it's introducing what we're talking about under rationale.
Oh, I'm looking at the actual policy where we've been putting in.
I'm sorry.
There looks to be some minor additions and some clarifications, which I think make it clear.
I have a question. Is it okay if I interject?
Please.
All right. And I get that this is the employee occupationally exposed to blood-borne pathogens policy, but I just assume that students will be in the building, and I'm curious as to why we limited safeguard of health and well-being to all district employees, because I'm sure we want to safeguard the health and well-being of anyone in our building.
So, Board Member Levy, do you mean, for example, a guest that's in the building at the time?
A guest, a student, anyone who's in the building. I'm just, and maybe there's a reason for it that's just not obvious to me, but the school district of Beloit shall strive to safeguard the health and well-being of all district employees. I'm just wondering why that specificity is included.
Dr. Kieser, can you comment on that? That's an interesting question.
So this is in the 500 series, which is in regards to employees. The 400 series specifically speaks to students. So,
okay. Is there any area then that would speak to a guest in the building? Do we need that for legal reasons? Attorney Love?
Well, I would have to look at what other policies you might have relative to others in the building. This specifically addresses occupational exposure, so that would be specific to employees. Mm-hmm. And a legal requirement so the law requires that you have a plan in place to address this issue. So that's what this policy is designed to do.
Okay.
The safety of others in the building could very well be addressed in other policies, but that would not be appropriate in this policy.
Okay, thank you for that input.
Just a quick clarifying question, because, and I'm sure this won't be the only time this policy is used, but what jumped into my mind is like an educator of small children and a child got hurt and now the teacher is dealing with blood. So I just thought it was curious is that we want to safeguard the health and safety of the employee instead of just safeguard health and safety. It's minor.
Well, and again, I think that the reason it's worded that way is because of the nature of this policy. There are certain things that you as an employer must do for employees and certain policies or plans that you have to have in place. And so this policy is designed to address that obligation that the district has for employees. And so it's not saying that you wouldn't be safeguarding the health and well-being of everybody, but for the purpose of what is legally required on blood-borne pathogens for employees and occupational exposure, that's why this one is worded in that way.
Thank you.
I'll move to recommend to the full Board of Education approval of the revision and layover of policy 523.2, employees occupationally exposed to blood-borne pathogens for first reading.
Second, but I do have a question for discussion.
Okay, great. We have a motion and a second to pass on to the full board approval for first reading with the revisions of policy 523.2, employees occupationally exposed to blood-borne pathogens. Are there any questions or discussions?
Yeah.
Board Member Reedy.
Thank you, Board Member Jacobs. Just for curiosity's sake, is there a reason why plans is capitalized? I see that was a change you made.
Oh, Attorney Love, you're muted.
Sorry.
That's
So
okay.
Are you referring to plans in the second paragraph or all throughout?
Throughout.
I believe in the law, I'd have to go back and look, but I believe the law exposure control plan is capitalized. And so then since it's the exposure control plan, then wherever we refer to it later, we capitalized it.
Perfect. And Board Member Wong, I just want clarification, since it wasn't read back to us, that everyone was fine, like with the suggestion that I made to strike out developed and adapted to readily available?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? None. So the motion passes. And this will go also to the full board this evening. And we are on policy 522.6, employee anti-harassment. Board Member Levy?
Thank you. Quick questions. Question. In our minutes that we approved for tonight, it referenced that this plan was postponed so we could look at it in conjunction with 511 affirmative action. And I was a little disappointed. I was very excited to work with both Attorney Love and a representative from Cambia to work through that affirmative action plan that was connected to this one while we postponed them to put them together. Dr. Kieser, could you give us a little information? And I got the email about the questions that we should be asking ourselves. I may be alone in this, but I was expecting a bit more participation from the group that's helping us with our equity work.
When I reached out, we reached out to Mr. Thomas and asked him to review this. They took the policy, they reviewed it. When they sent it back, as they read through it, their response back to us was more of a reflective question in terms of not specific adjustments to this, but to the point that I shared with the committee, if we are looking to adopt policy that is more in line with an equitable vision of our district, these are the reflective questions that we need to ask. So they, absent the context of our specific environment, our community, he didn't provide any contextual changes to this other than the response that I forwarded to the committee. So, yes, he did not provide us with changes to that, but he did provide us what he felt was something that would help us move in the direction that we were hoping to start that journey as a district. But I had not invited him to this committee. I did not interpret the help in that way. So I can certainly reach out to him and ask if he would be willing to participate in the conversation. But I did not specifically ask him to attend our committee meetings.
No, and that, I think I had it envisioned one way in my head, but I would love to hear from my other committee members because maybe that was an expectation only held by me. That's possible.
Board Member Wong?
Again, it was my understanding as well that we would have some feedback. Now, whether it was in person or if it was, with them being part of this committee or working together with Attorney Love or administrative staff, I don't know if that was clear, and I can't recall that or not.
Board Member Wong, I'm sorry, you kind of went out at the end and I couldn't catch all that. Would you mind repeating? I'm sorry.
I said that the information that my understanding was there was going to be communication or a connection with Cambio Group along with the Attorney Love to determine what they would say and provide their input. Now, whether that was in this committee or if it was not going to be, I don't know if that was clarified. I can't recall that.
Okay, thank you. And I guess to answer your question, Board Member Levy, I was expecting what we've got. I wasn't expecting Cambio to actually be here or a representative from the group. But I was expecting the input in the written form, as we have. And of course, we have Attorney Love here.
I would only say is when it was asked of me, I did reach out to them as as we are just beginning that process with the Cambio group and starting that 3-year journey with them. This was an ask, and say this was not an original specific part of that, but would you be willing to? They did extend that that indication that they would. So I can go back to them if the committee would like more specific detail. I can coordinate a call with Attorney Love and Mr. Thomas and specifically look at this language and then ask for some specific revisions, suggestions to this group to consider. But
Board Member Levy, is that an old one or a new one?
It's an old one, but I was just about to put a new one in, so I will take the opportunity. I think we're here. We have the work in front of us. Let's get started on the anti-harassment and the affirmative action. And if we come to a spot where we want their specific input, then if you could take that back to the group, I think that might be the best course of action at this point.
I agree.
All right.
Do we want to look at them side by side? So, because that was the intent, was to have these side by side, because the one does refer back to the other.
Can you put that up on screen, Dr. Kieser?
I would only be able to do one at a time.
I thought so. I wondered if, with my technological background that Board Member Wong knows I have, I just thought perhaps there was something I was missing.
No, I apologize. I forget that I'm.
No,
It's
it's
fine.
Oh, Dr. Kieser, I'm making fun of myself right now. I'm with my little technical. I know, Board Member Wong, you want to say something? No, okay, he's holding off. All right, so
before we go too far off the track, if you pull it up and then just pull both of them up so they're tabs right next to each other, if you pull one of the tabs off, we might be able to pull it off. Do you know, does that make sense, Dr. Kieser?
Yes. Let me go.
thank you, Board Member Levy. While he's doing that, Board Member Wong, I really would like to say something in response, but I'm going to keep it professional, so I will not.
I said nothing.
I know.
All right. Let's see. I just need to resize. All right, we'll give this a go here, and I apologize if it goes a little crazy here. So, my entire screen. Are we seeing two policies side by side?
I can't see anything yet.
Nope. Okay.
Something's coming up now, Dr. Key. Oh, okay. Oh, boy. If they're both up, can everyone else read that?
I have them on my own device, so I'm good.
Good here.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kieser.
Here we are. So on the right-hand side of the screen is 511, affirmative action and equal opportunity employment, and on the left is the employee anti-harassment. In part, the affirmative action, equal opportunity employment, it speaks to not only the opening kind of preamble talking about the beliefs, but then it goes specific into the report and investigation components of equal opportunity. And then the employee anti-harassment speaks to, again, the opening being the preamble and the belief, and then the bottom part speaking to if there is a case of harassment, what procedure would we follow? And that references back to the same procedure that's outlined in 511.
Can we get started with reviewing 522.6?
That sounds like a good idea. So 522.6, correct, Board Member Levy?
Yes, that's next on the agenda.
Yep, that's
Okay,
this.
so let's just take it paragraph by paragraph then, if that's all right with everyone. For the first paragraph, Board Member Levy would like to put maintaining. I have no problem with that. Comment, Board Member Wong?
Just a comment. Didn't we already go over the first two paragraphs previously? Yeah. There's a little.
Didn't we what?
There's a little note underneath the second paragraph that's where we left off, was after the second paragraph. So we already discussed the first two.
You're correct. Okay, so the board will investigate. So we're on the third then. Board Member Levy, could you clarify your comment? This is not happening within the board?
Well, let me pose it as a question, because I know personally of several incidences of harassment, etc. So I know investigations like that have not happened in the year that I've been on the board. Did that happen prior to this past year where the board was conducting investigations?
And this might be a clarification from Attorney Love, but in that paragraph where it's the board will investigate, it is really the investigatory body is HR who's investigating that, and then if the complaint rises up through and appeals to, it will eventually get up to the board level.
Right, so that was my comment, because this says the board will investigate all allegations of harassment, and it's my understanding that that's not what's happening. So either that needs to happen, or we need to change this language so it reflects the experience.
So
I think you could simply modify it to say all allegations of harassment will be investigated in accordance with policy 511, affirmative action and equal opportunity employment.
I like that. I'm sorry, Dr. Kieser, did I interrupt you?
We said the same thing in unison.
Board Member Wong, any comment?
No.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Ms. Scholl, would you mind rereading that? Did you catch it?
Yes, I did.
Thank you, ma'am.
The paragraph will start, all allegations of harassment will be investigated in accordance with Policy 511, Affirmative Action and Equal Opportunity Employment, and in those cases where harassment is substantiated, the board will take immediate steps calculated to end the harassment, prevent its recurrence, and if applicable, remedy its effects. Individuals who are found to have engaged in harassment will be subject to appropriate disciplinary action.
Oh, I was on mute talking to y'all. Okay, and I don't know where I picked up this yell from. So we good with going to the next paragraph then, committee?
I have a question.
Sure.
All right. So we have to keep in mind that this is a policy for the school district of Beloit, and our most recent history has been that employees have been harassed. And so I'm talking through this as I'm thinking it. Attorney Love, would we run into issues? So here's the point that I want to make. I don't care who is doing the harassment, whether they're at KEC, whether they're in one of the buildings, that everyone will be dealt with, because I think that the spirit in the district among some employees, that it depends on who's doing the harassing, whether or not they will be disciplined. Let me just clarify, who has done the harassment? I don't know of any current cases where people are harassing, but I know that has been the experience of some of my former colleagues, that it depended on who was harassing you, whether or not there would be discipline involved.
Well, each case is investigated on its own merits. There is no set formula as to what level of discipline might be imposed in any individual case. The law says that any steps that are taken, and it doesn't necessarily have to be discipline, but any steps that are taken must stop any harassment, prevent it from recurring, and remedy any issues that have arisen from potential harassment. So your action could be simply republishing the policy, depending on the nature of the harassment. It could be all the way up to termination of the individual who has been accused of harassment. So every case is different. The steps you take to remedy the harassment will not be the same in every case.
Is it worth emphasizing that we don't care who the harasser is? That does not make them immune to the consequences, with the backdrop of that has been the experience of some employees in the district.
I mean, we could find a place to emphasize that. I think it's in there. And then later in the other policy that deals with how it's investigated, it talks about who does the investigation and addresses those things again as to what steps will be taken. But if you wanted to add language that said that every individual found to have engaged in harassment will be subject to corrective action. We could certainly add that. I would not encourage you to say discipline, because sometimes you determine that discipline is not necessary based on the allegations the record of the individual involved. Like any discipline, you look at the totality of the circumstances.
Thank you so much. I would love to hear from my other colleagues on the committee.
Board Member Wong?
I mean, you're not referring to past harassment situations, are you, Board Member Levy? I mean, is that what we're addressing here? Is that...
I am. Here's my thing, and I'll be as clear as possible. There have been persons in the district who have harassed other employees in the district, and very little or nothing was done about it. And so we have a situation where people, not everyone, but some people are still uncomfortable with coming forward, with saying things that are happening, because they don't want that, what's the word I'm looking for? The retaliation. And so I just want to be clear that moving forward, we don't care who is doing the harassing. It is unacceptable, and it will be resolved, and we don't care what your title is. But of course, an appropriate way to say that. But yes, that's exactly what I'm referencing.
Okay, I mean, we're not talking about situations that have already been investigated and brought to the board, correct?
I'm talking about the ramifications of that. So I'm not asking us to reopen anything or revisit or undo something that has already been done. No, okay. I'm not doing that. But because of those situations, I want for staff that are reading this policy to know that we don't have a hierarchy of if you work in this building, it is okay to harass, but if you work in that building, it is not. And there will be, however Attorney Love said it. So not discipline, but corrective action. I just want that message to be clear, and stating that in a legally appropriate way.
And I see where you're coming from, Board Member Levy. I would agree with that. And Attorney Love, you know, I'm heading toward you now to give us some great language.
So let's look at that paragraph, because I think that it already addresses this issue, though I'm sure that we have language in here about not retaliating, but in that what would it be, the third paragraph, the board will investigate all allegations of harassment. In those cases where harassment is substantiated, the board will take immediate steps calculated to end the harassment, prevent its recurrence, and, if applicable, remedy its effects. And then we say individuals who have been found to have engaged in harassment will be subject to appropriate disciplinary action. So I don't know, are you saying you would like to add language that says regardless of their position with the district?
Yes, something to that effect. And the only reason I bring it up is because that is the part of the policy that has been unchanged, but I can tell you that that has not necessarily been followed. So I just want us to be clear that we are not looking at titles as to the enforcement of this policy, that this policy applies to all of us.
And you could add that language, but if I could just make an observation regarding harassment claims and investigations, and I've been doing it for a long time. There are often, because of the confidentiality of personnel records, the steps that an employer takes to address harassment cases and issues are not published. So a complainant, often someone who is a complainant in a harassment case, they want the accused harasser gone. The law doesn't require that, and that is not always necessary. I mean, sometimes, yes, termination is the appropriate action, but the law doesn't require it. And especially in the public sector with due process, you have to weigh and apply due process in your other policies regarding discipline. So you will not terminate in every instance. And I would say that in many cases, when someone has accused another of harassment and the harasser is not terminated, the victim, the accuser, does not feel that the appropriate action has been taken and will not be satisfied with that, and they feel that the harasser got away with it. And that's why when you mentioned retaliation, that's an important element of this, is that anyone coming forward with a complaint of discrimination or harassment is protected from retaliation and encouraged to come forward if in fact there is retaliation. That is the protection that the employee and the employer have if the steps that were taken did not accomplish what was intended, which is to stop the harassment and prevent it from recurring and to avoid retaliation. So I just offer that as kind of an explanation of what happens in these cases. Given that, I think you can add language in here. It will not change the legal weight of the policy to add to the end of that paragraph appropriate disciplinary action regardless of the employee's position with the district.
May I interject, Board Member Levy? Thank you. Attorney Love, thank you for that explanation. And Board Member Levy, as soon as I'm done, please go ahead with what you would like to say. I'm just looking at the time, everyone, and it is 6:55, and we're right in the meat of it, but I think we need a break before the board meeting starts at 7. Having said that, Board Member Levy, do you want to go ahead with your question and or comment? And if it's okay with the committee and everyone else, then we will go ahead and adjourn before the meeting so we can have a quick break.
Yes. Attorney Love, I completely agree with everything you said, and thank you for sharing it for people who are watching. But because of our recent past, I just feel personally passionate that I want to make staff, I want to be very clear that we are not respecters of titles in incidents where harassment is occurring.
So I would, if everyone's all right with that, I would love for us to start with this policy at that point next time, if that's all right with the committee and participants. And our next meeting will be on, I guess I'm not giving you guys time to respond. Is everybody all right with that?
I just have a question. Are we good with that paragraph then, or are we gonna start over again?
I think we wouldn't really have to start over. If it's already 6:56, we could take 4 minutes and put different language in. There wouldn't be any break time, or what do you guys want to do?
Ms. Sho, could you just put a note in to the language that Attorney Love suggested? I am 99% sure we are all on board with that, but could we just pick up with that spot?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So does that answer your question then, board member? Okay, all right. So then, our next meeting date will be Tuesday, April 13th, time to be announced. And we're now at adjournment. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second? Okay, great. We have a motion and a second for adjournment. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All right. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Attorney Love. Good night.
Okay, good evening. The time is now 7:03, and I believe we are ready to call our meeting to order. Let me just make sure everybody's here and ready to go. Ms. Schultz, may we please have a roll call attendance, please?
Anderson,
Present.
Jacobs,
Here.
Levy,
Here.
Miller,
Present.
Delgado,
Present.
Wong.
Present.
All members are present with Miller and Wong in the boardroom.
Thank you very much, Ms. Schultz. May I please have a motion to approve our agenda? And if anybody else has amendments to make, let me know. But as I have it right now, we would be moving to approve the agenda without items 7G through 7L.
That is correct from the policy and Madam President.
Thank you. Would somebody like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, the motion passes unanimously to approve our agenda with those changes. At this time, I would like to invite Dr. Kieser to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
For the
and
America.
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kieser. At this time, we are moving on to announcements. And it looks like Board Member Delgado, would it be possible for you to read our announcements this evening?
Sure can.
Thank you.
Okay, so the announcements for Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. The district hosted an online fun and engaging competition to name our food trucks. There were 2 rounds of voting and dozens of submissions. The 2 winning entries are the lunchbox submitted by Anaí Arroyo, an 8th grade student at the Aldrich Intermediate School, and Cuisine submitted by Lauren Jones, a sophomore at the Beloit Memorial High School. Last Wednesday, the school district of Beloit Memorial High School, and Fort NGL hosted a community session to develop a profile of a graduate. 50 people from Fort NGL, our business partners, community and city leaders, volunteers, higher education representatives, nonprofit organizations, teachers, administrators, families, students, and board representatives came together to create a North Star vision and goal for all graduates of our district. Next step includes creating a profile of graduate document to reflect all the input and information from this session. This will also be referred to in the upcoming strategic planning of our district. Each quarter, district staff nominate their peers for recognition under our All-Star Award program. Award winners receive a certificate, a small gift, and a recognition on our website and Facebook pages. This quarter's All-Star Award winners are Brett Berg, Deb Edmonds, Ann Fleesick, Dave Gary, Brandy Grady, and Kathy Reichek. March 2nd was the National Red Cross America, and we hosted an online campaign encouraging families to share photos of their children and teens reading their favorite book. District staff also share a photo of themselves reading their favorite childhood book. Our staff photos were created into a banner that was uploaded to Facebook and all district websites. We ended the campaign with a random drawing of all photos uploaded by families to Facebook, with the winner receiving a basket full of their favorite books. Beloit Memorial High School student Hunter Thomas was the lucky winner. We share the photos of all participants in a video on our Facebook page and website. The School District of Beloit has released and premiered the district video, All Children Can Dream and Think Beyond Now. You can view this video in English and Spanish on our Facebook page, every homepage of all district websites, on our YouTube channel, and on Spectrum Cable Channel 991. And this ends our announcements.
Thank you so much, Board Member Delgado. Really appreciate it. At this time, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Christopa for recognition of Carrie for a donation of hand sanitizer.
Good evening, everyone. We are very grateful to Mr. Jim Egan, Corporate Affairs and Communications, North America at Carrie Inc., for their generous donation of 3 pallets of hand sanitizer to our district. That is a total of 576 gallons, I say gallons, of hand sanitizer. With our cohort in-person learning to begin on April 8th, our staff, students, families, and board thank Mr. Egan and Carrie for thinking of us and helping us to keep everyone safe and healthy. Desmond Tutu said it the best. Do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. Thank you, Carrie. You have overwhelmed our world and us with your generosity. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Ms. Christopa. At this time, we're going to move on to public comment. I know we have at least one email that was submitted. Is there anybody in attendance today that would like to make a public comment? All right, so we have one in person, and is it just one via email, Ms. Shope? Okay, so at this time, I'm going to read over our public content piece and then welcome our public comments. All right, let's see. Am I on the right thing here? There we are. Okay, citizens are welcome to attend all open meetings of the Board of Education. Robert's Rules of Order will be followed at all times. Persons attending board meetings are expected to conduct themselves in a respectful and courteous manner that models appropriate behavior for our students. Persons wishing to comment are expected to comply with the following norms in order to maintain a respectful and orderly meeting and to protect all persons, including members of the public, district employees, and district students from personal attacks or discussion of confidential matters in a public forum. Comments should be directed to members of the Board of Education and not district employees, students, or other members of the public in attendance at the meeting. Comments that attack any individual personally or professionally or are derogatory or demean others will not be tolerated. Personnel matters or concerns regarding specific district personnel are not appropriate topics to be addressed during an open meeting and should be handled in accordance with district policy and procedures. Concerns or questions regarding students will not be allowed. Comments regarding another individual's membership in a legally protected class, i.e. race, sexual orientation, religion, etc., is strictly prohibited. Response from the board will be limited to clarifying inaccurate information, seeking additional information from the citizen, or acknowledging that the citizen has been understood. The board will not debate with the citizen, and the board may not take action on an item raised during public comment that is not on the meeting notice or agenda. The chair will interrupt and rule a citizen who violates any of these norms out of order. If ruled out of order by the chair, the person's opportunity to address the board will end immediately, and the microphone will be turned off. A citizen who violates these norms may be restricted from making public comments at future meetings. Thank you for your participation and courtesy. All right, Mr. Levy, would you like to start us off this evening?
Is that on? Okay. Sean Levy, 2074 Cobblestone Court, Beloit. I'm speaking tonight to thank the Board of Education for your most recent 6-0 vote and decision to return to in-person learning beginning in the 4th term. As a parent, I supported the 7-0 vote and decision that the Board of Education made to begin the school year in distance learning to protect the health and safety of our children and the people who take care of them daily and ensure that they are educated. As a parent, I support the return to in-person learning based on science, the context of our local condition, and our evolving understanding of COVID-19. Based on science, the CDC has consistently called for schools to implement the 5 mitigation strategies of consistent and correct use of masks, social distancing to the largest extent possible, hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette, cleaning and disinfection, and contact tracing in collaboration with the local health department. And in the last few weeks, even more recommendations and guidance from the CDC has come forth that make a return to in-person learning possible. The context of our local condition, although there is still evidence of ongoing person-to-person transmission in Rock County, the metrics have changed in a positive trend, and now we've experienced multiple weeks where the percent of tests that have been positive over the last 14 days is below 5%, which places our school in the lowest risk of transmission designation, according to the Rock County Public Health Department. Also, many of our educators have now and are continuing to be offered the opportunity to be vaccinated. The return to in-person learning is much safer both physically and psychologically. I also am an educator. It's just easier to do your job knowing that you've greatly reduced your risk of getting sick and dying. We all live in Wisconsin, and the posted speed limit on I-43 and I-90 may be 70 miles per hour, but when there's a fresh snow on the ground, we all know that we must drive at a speed that is safe for the road conditions that we are experiencing if we intend to arrive at our destination safely. The whole world is experiencing this global pandemic, and I am pleased that we are not a vehicle that is stuck on the side of the road or in the median. While our return to in-person learning, with our return to in-person learning, there are many firsts that the school district will experience once you open. In an attempt to safely provide this essential service under these challenging conditions, it's important that the school district learn how to educate and drive safely in this snowstorm that is COVID-19 as we make our way through it. We know more than we did a year ago, and we're currently in a race for vaccines versus the variants, whereas a year ago we were in a race for a vaccine. As our district is in the process of implementing its plan to return to in-person learning, I ask that this Board of Education stay focused and provide consistency and stability to our students, parents, administration, teachers, and staff as we establish what our plan is, the plan that the School District of Beloit will use for learning during the remainder or the beginning of the 4th term, summer school, and the 21-22 school year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Schulp, do you have our next comment? Thank you.
This is an email from Pam Charles, 2227 Carnforth Place. Members of the board and Dr. Kieser, as you likely know, the CDC has updated its recommendations on school reopening plans, reflecting the guidance of other national experts as well as the current practice of many districts in Wisconsin and across the country. No longer is 6-foot distancing required. A 3-foot distance of masked students is sufficient, according to the latest science and guidance. Plexiglass dividers on desks or tables are not recommended. Many parents believe that the hybrid model, 2-day school week, that the board approved will be even more difficult for families and disruptive for students than the situation that we have now. The updated CDC guidelines allow for more students to be in the classrooms, halls, and buses while still safely distancing. With the new guidance, we can probably have 4 or 5 day school weeks like other local districts are now providing their students. There's plenty of time between now and April 8th to adjust our district's reopening plan according to these new CDC guidelines. It will require more planning, more communication, and an additional meeting, but there is nothing more important than this board or our superintendent has to do than to provide the most effective learning environment for Beloit students. This community should not have to hope for new board members to be elected in order to have full-time, in-person schools. We should be able to count on each one of you currently serving to provide the most that you can for our kids immediately. No amount of marketing, public relations, or communication can successfully promote a closed school district, especially when others are open 4 and 5 days per week. We have struggled with student achievement issues and watched our district decline in ratings and enrollment for many years now. The most effective advertisement is results. Give Beloit students what other neighboring districts are giving their students. Open our schools according to the latest science and guidelines. Provide what Beloit children need to be properly educated, and let our parents and students stop having to beg this board and our superintendent to open schools. the most important step you can take to keep Beloit students in our schools next fall is to fully open this spring. Pamela Charles.
Thank you so much. Are there any other public comments at this time? All right, thank you very much. All right, so next item is item 4A, which is the Superintendent's Board Report. So I will turn it over to Dr. Kieser.
Thank you and good evening. So I'm excited to have the team that has been working on these district board goals that we established way back in this fall, so October. And as we reflect back, we reflect on the process that we use within the school district Beloit, within all of our schools, what we call our continuous improvement process. Whether it is through professional learning communities or PLCs, or a transformative leadership process that our Professional Administrators Association promotes, the idea of continuous improvement is the hallmark of our vision for Beloit moving forward. How do we make next year better than this year? How do we make this year better than last year? No matter what your background is on continuous improvement, it really distills down to 4 basic components. The first one being that you focus in on no more than 2 to 3 goals. Next, you act on measures that you will monitor throughout the process to determine whether or not you're making progress towards those goals, and if so, whether you double down or you have to change your direction and move in a new area. You have to have a way to monitor those goals. So having some sort of progress monitoring tool, sometimes referred to as a scoreboard or a dashboard. And finally, you have to have a system and structure of feedback and, as again, progress monitoring to make sure that you keep coming back to these goals and make sure that you are addressing the need to move forward and double down or make adjustments because you're not making the progress that you thought. As we established the goals back in October, I brought these back to the executive director team and the director team across all of our departments. There's not one department within the district that is not working on one or more of these goals in conjunction. And so I'm thrilled to have the people who have been taking these goals, making them a part of their day-to-day work, speak to the work that's been done thus far. Knowing that this is a pandemic and that pandemic has created unpredictable issues throughout the year, we are not where we would want to be had we been able to focus on these in the manner that we planned on back in October. But we have made progress, and many of these goals, as we stated back in October, are goals that are going to extend well beyond this year. In fact, these are part of our goals that we would expect to see as part of our strategic plan moving forward. So as I bring up the slide deck, or if someone else is going to be driving the slide deck, I will be turning it over to our pupil service, teaching, learning, and equity, business, facilities, operations, and human relations department members to talk through each of these goals. And we will start with goal number 1, which is speaking towards as I bring it up, focus on academic and social emotional learning needs of a child during the time of this pandemic. So with that, I will turn it over to our team.
Before we get started, how would you like questions?
Thank you.
Yes.
We will do questions at the end once we get done with the slide deck. We have about 11 slides.
Perfect. So board members, if you want to put questions in the chat box as we go, that's fine. And I'll start to address them as soon as the full slide deck has been completed. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. This is Teresa Morita. I can begin with goal 1, and then I don't really want to read every word to you on the slide of each slide. So some of those things we'll pick and choose, maybe that we can lean into a little bit. And then if there's questions and it was something that we didn't spend time on, we can certainly do that in our question and answers or for clarification during that time as well. So this first goal is around social emotional learning needs during the pandemic and are also academic needs. And so this one involves being responsive to the ever-changing world of the pandemic, which we all are a part of, right? And so there has been some movement in this in regards to understanding reflection and analysis and where we are, and then where we want to go. So if you go to the next slide, Dr. Keyser, we can look at analysis and reflection. And so when Dr. Keyser just went through those 4 steps, another way to put into context what he talked about is that plan, do, study, act cycle. And so part of that is analyzing and reflecting, right, and doing a root cause analysis. So some of the areas that I wanted to point out is that we've had consistent engagement during our terms 1 through 3. And another piece is working towards meeting those individual needs with the opportunity of bringing in small groups during term 3. And then there's some areas of growth that we're recognizing. An area is understanding its connection to actual learning, right? That those are linked. Social emotional learning is linked with academic learning. And so as we work through that piece with our administrators, we're talking with them about how they're bringing that to the staff. And another really important one, I think, is understanding how systematic racism affects social emotional learning. And so some of those more antiquated practices of SEL have been criticized in leaving out the actual effects of racism on students in a community. And so thinking it through that with our staff as well will be some areas of growth. Thank you. And so progress to date, these are some things that we have done. We have those explicit, first let me step back and just say, we recognize that SEL, social emotional learning, has to happen both explicitly and embedded. And so you have to have intentional times that you are addressing it. We have core curriculum for that in our second step, and then our 7 mindsets is a recent purchase that Eric can also speak to about some of the professional development there in just a minute. Also, this continuous improvement planning on equity, the team has done a really nice job starting last spring and bringing in some equity audits that the schools were engaged in to inform their own continuous improvement process and planning. And then that castle, those are the critical areas of SEL, and that's a framework that you can work off of. And so that Reunite, Renew, and Thrive has been brought into the loop. I think our first time we brought that in was in January with or maybe December, because it was before winter break, so it was December. And thinking through a roadmap and how we're bringing SEL into the fold, especially with the return into schools. I really like that document and that framework because it does recognize the role that racism takes when addressing a safe environment for kids, a sense of belonging, and then understanding that self-care piece isn't just for kids, it's also for adults. So that's been a grounding document for us and will continue to be as we grow into it. And then, Eric, would you like to come off the mic and speak to a little bit about the 7 mindsets and then the PD provided for staff around adolescent mental health and trauma?
Sure.
Thank you, Eric.
Yep. So for 7 mindsets, obviously we understand and we know that in order for a new curriculum to be able to be delivered with fidelity, there needs to be some intentional professional development and training of the staff around that. And so the secondary level has been working on getting staff trained to implement the programs within 7 mindsets. The intent is to be able to start delivering some lessons as we embark on coming back, and then really have things set to go for next school year. In terms of professional development around the adolescent mental health and trauma, we have had, as part of our school safety grant, there's been mental health training. Secretaries, admin assistants, student services staff have gone through some training. Our security guards have gone through some training. There's also been some advanced training provided in a 3-part series to our student services staff, which are the staff members that are actively supporting our students with some of the most significant mental health needs currently, and continue to do so as buildings identify them through their Students of Concern meetings.
Thank you, Eric. The last bullet point on there is one of our Hanover research projects coming to fruition. And so as we've been working in partnership with Hanover, if you recall, I think it was Dr. Keyser's last board meeting presentation, or one of them, he talked about a series of projects. And so what this one is doing is recognizing that we really want to know what our students are experiencing and feeling. And there's this quantitative survey, but then also allowing student interviews to capture actual qualitative data, conversations. It'll allow us to have potential quotes or to examine themes in a qualitative way. And that's important because oftentimes in education, we put a lot of weight on the quantitative piece, and there's also value in looking at qualitative data and what people are actually saying. And so that's a project that has been designed that will be implemented going forward. Okay, our second goal is addressing literacy. And Tony, would you like to come off of the mic and talk a little bit? And then Rosa Maria, I'll have you also follow up around some of the professional development.
Absolutely. Good evening, board members. Thanks for having us. As we started out the school year, we had focused on, in the distance learning framework, really addressing key areas in terms of making sure that we're able to serve the needs of kids in such extraordinary times. And as and Ms. Moratek alluded to this earlier, as we ended last school year, we started building out our continuous improvement process and really allowing buildings, encouraging buildings, working with buildings to collaborate around a continuous improvement process that really focused on their specific school climate and needs, and really gave them the opportunity to, as building leadership teams, as continuous improvement teams, to really analyze their data and look at their systems and their structures and develop strategic plans focused on SMART goals that were very clearly connected, had equity connections as a means of addressing the disparities that we're seeing in achievement for marginalized groups of students. And so over the course of this school year, we have seen a lot of focus from buildings and also at the district level in terms of how those building level plans have aligned with this goal in particular and our short-term goals overall, and really helped us develop a more strategic approach to meeting the needs of each building. And those continuous improvement plans have really, again, focused on needs assessments that each building conducted, and have really developed into plans that very specifically address specific root causes at each of those individual buildings. All of our buildings have a school improvement plan, and we're went through the continuous improvement process together in a very coherent structure. And as each of those buildings develops their plan, we ask that they look at their subgroup data. We ask that they analyze those root causes in over the course of this year, and as Dr. Keyser talked about at the beginning, moving into years coming, how that continuous improvement process builds upon itself, those systems continue to strengthen, and we use that as a catalyst for improvement over time. We think that's a critical opportunity for us to leverage in the district. We've worked closely between building level teams, central office, also enlisting support of CISA 2 in our efforts to improve and really focus our continuous improvement efforts. And I think that's really starting to help our buildings focus on their improvement targets. As we focused also on literacy, some of the other things that we've done is really through our professional learning community structures. We've had a great opportunity this year to utilize our Wednesday time to allow our building level teams, our professional learning communities by grade level and content area to really focus and strengthen on priority standards that were set last summer going into the school year, and really be able to analyze their data at the classroom level, at the teacher level, at the student level, to best meet the needs of their individual learners. That's another area that, despite the fact that we don't have a lot of standardized assessment data, because we haven't been in buildings to do some of our standardized tests, we have been able to work collaboratively within these PLCs to really analyze the needs of students and adjust instruction to better meet the needs of those learners. And again, in such extraordinary times, our staff has really done a lot of heavy lifting in this area.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to just jump in for a second, Tony, if you don't mind, just to kind of talk a little bit about that's the continuous improvement at the building level, and then also how through our analysis and reflection, we've done some identification of needs as well. And so that's what's on this slide that Dr. Keyser is showing. I jumped ahead a little bit, so I apologize. And some of those things too that we want to work on is needed growth in asset-based mindset and language. And I bring that up tonight because I think it's really important that we talk about data, that we think about the language we use. So in that conversation and the conversations with schools and school improvement, how are we calling attention to a need in those persistent unequal academic and social outcomes that we've had for students in certain groups? And how are we calling attention to that sense of urgency, but also not falling into a trap of deficit language and mindsets? And so that's some work that we need to do, I believe, and how do we have both high expectations and high levels of support. And so really changing the narrative and how we think about all of the wonderful things our kids are doing, the excellence that is already within our children, right? We are not fixing kids. And so that's some of the work that I believe I'm excited about going forward, and there are important conversations that we need to have. And Tony touched a little bit on some of that professional learning community work that we've been doing. This year has lended itself to that opportunity to lean in a little more with professional learning communities on the Wednesdays. So we're working through what that'll look like in the future to keep that momentum going. Next slide, please. And so Tony touched upon the SMART goals, and that E is intentional because that has equity at the end of a SMART goal. So those are commonly written in school improvement. And could you speak a little more to what you wanted to add, Tony? And then I think Rosa Maria could really touch on some of the professional development that she has been doing with staff in regards to literacy.
The last thing I'll add before we turn it over to Rosa Maria is just the intentionality this year through priority standards and really being able to focus on, in such an extraordinary context, an extraordinarily challenging context, how we can leverage the high impact strategies as best we can to really meet the needs of students across the board. That really has been a huge focus of our continuous improvement processes, our professional learning communities, and all of our work in any of the teams that we've been a part of this year. And so I think that's been a huge focus. And Rosa Maria can talk about additional professional development structures that we've used to meet some of those goals.
Thank you, Tony. Some of the things that we have been doing this year, I reflect back on this year, and it's been a very productive year as far as doing the professional learning with our teachers and with our staff. One of the things that Tony set up before the school year even started was contracting with CISA 2 to help us with, which we did start last year. It's called Thinking Maps, which is one of Hattie's high leverage strategies with concept mapping. And we last year trained our dual language and EL teachers. This year we have extended that to the entire elementary staff for the most part. The other thing is that we've done a lot of work with foundational skills, and part of that was because of the high quality materials adoption that we're working on this year. We were piloting, so the companies have been able to help us with that. But in addition to that, there has been book studies and other work done regarding foundational skills. The other thing is that our EL teachers, we had some that were trained to be trainers of sheltered instruction, which is a strategy that has been used in the world of English learners and bilingual education for a very long time. But this was extended to our intermediate staff, where the teachers are able to differentiate instruction for all of our students. One thing that we did do with our EL teachers this year is that we started training them on coaching. Besides supporting the students in the classroom, we do want them to start supporting teachers through the coaching practices, especially as dual language has expanded in our district. We find it very important that the EL teachers would be able to support the classroom teachers in how to, especially in the area of language development with our teachers. The other thing that this year, Wisconsin adopted a revised version of the English language arts standards. And this is something that maybe, we can definitely give you more information about it. It's something that I'm, as I read through them more and more, I become more excited about what Wisconsin has decided to do with our language arts standards. They are highly tailored to our students in our district, I believe. They did include some key shifts, which the first two they are claiming are unique to Wisconsin. The first one is the students keeping their identity and also learning about other people that are different than them. And the second shift is all about flexibility of language and how students, their home language or their home dialect should be honored and should be the bridge for the students to learn more academic language. So those are all the things that we, many of the things that we have been working on this year. I see in here as well about the vision for literacy and empathy groups. I think, Teresa, that's something that you may want to.
Sure. I'll touch on that just briefly because we do have in April the materials adoption presentation, so we'll go into more of that then. But something that we wanted to do was just begin to formulate what's the vision we have for literacy in the school district of Beloit. And because materials are within the context or couched in that overall broader vision. And so what we wanted to do was run a series of empathy interviews. An empathy interview is a way to do a focus group interview. And what you're trying to do in that, it's really oftentimes an equity strategy, because what you're trying to do is lift a voice through storytelling. So you might start off with saying, tell me a little bit about how you learned how to read. Or what are your hopes for our kids? What are your concerns for our kids? And in addition, coupled with this type of interview process, and collecting all of this qualitative data and identifying themes across these different stakeholder groups, we're also intentional in forming some affinity groups. So we had different groups that identify racially to pull together ideas where sometimes voices are lost in the crowd. And so that was also intentional. And again, we can go into that more during the other presentation, but that allowed us to hear from everyone and to hear lots of voices in different groups, an intentional way to create a vision, an actual, what do we say we want for our kids? And then that vision will inform our programming commitments. And once we have the programming commitments, then we can think about, the materials that we want and the materials that we don't want anymore is probably the best way to summarize that.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Goal 3 falls under the work that Human Resources has been working on, and it's really about increasing staff retention across all categories with specific emphasis on staff of color, and fostering a work environment that is inclusive and equitable. So in regards to the analysis and the reflection around that, each year we have a culture survey, and that is extended to our staff twice a year. In fact, right now we have our spring survey, and that is active until March 26th. So staff are providing us feedback, and then of course we always have a board presentation on the feedback that we get. It gives us an idea of where our opportunities are, and really at the end of the day, it's about measuring employee engagement. The analysis on the needed growth for diversity. So we are pulling metrics on a more frequent basis on turnover and retention, and we're including diversity metrics within that report, and we'll be reporting that out in April to the board. This allows us to really be intentional with hiring, and we know where our opportunities are. We also talk about needed growth and platforms for recruitment, and I'll talk a little bit about that more on the next slide and some of the things that we've been able to put into place. And then the needed growth for increasing opportunities for growing our own pipeline. So we're really in the infant stages of really doing the work around creating pipelines. So we currently do have some residency programs where we're partnering with UW-Madison. It's called the UW-SET program. Missy Beavers has talked with the board about that program in the past, but what that has allowed staff members with a bachelor's degree that are interested in pursuing their special education degree or certification is that they can do their classwork with UW-Madison. They're provided a stipend for the year, and then their student teaching would be done here in Beloit. So the whole idea around that is that they would come back to Beloit and teach for us. And then just recently, Mr. Bosco had worked on creating a partnership with Concordia to help ESL teachers gain their certification. So we do have a couple of things in the works, and we understand that there's a lot more work to be done with pipelines. And with a recruiter coming on board, we're hoping that that person will build the relationships within the different departments of the district and kind of help some of the heavy lifting with that project work. There's also the needed growth and retention efforts. And so really when you talk about retention, it's really about employee engagement. And so on the next slide, we'll talk about some of the things that we've put in place to really drive employee engagement. And then the last bullet point, reflection and change in process and procedures to support retention. Again, we'll talk about like our staff handbook on the next slide and some of the other things that we've put in place to drive that. So this first bullet point is increased mentoring opportunities, and Michelle Elliott is with us, and she's going to talk a little more about that for us.
Hi, good evening, Board of Education. So a couple of things that we've done this year when it comes to kind of how do we stop that revolving door. We are continuing to be a part of the new Teacher Center through CISA 2. So we have 3 graduates. Last year we have 4 people in year 2 and 8 people this year. So we have a new Teacher Center in every building. And what does that look like? They are getting high quality professional development kind of turning them into mini instructional coaches, really working with new staff, and this program is dedicated to making sure that new staff stay in education. And it really looks at how do you use mentoring for equity. We also updated our mentoring handbook this year. We trained about 165 of our best teachers with the DPI mentoring training this summer. And currently we have 145-ish mentees that we are working with. And who gets a mentee? DPI has expanded those criteria in the last couple of years. So anyone 0 to 3 years in education, we need to really be looking at what is it that they need. Also, anyone that has a 1-year stipulated license. And so really kind of trying to get down to like those subgroups. Like if you're on a stipulated license, what is it that we need to do to help you to get certified? Is it to help you find a career path? Is it to give you a mentor that is in that area that can help you? So really trying to figure out what is it that our subgroups need so that we keep those staff members in the school district of Beloit. So we're going to continue with really trying to figure out what is it that our staff needs so we can keep them, so we can stop that revolving door.
Thank you, Rochelle. This next bullet point is our commitment to improving perceptions and experiences of current staff. And so really how we measure that is through our climate and culture survey. The one exciting thing that we're doing this year is we're actually using our data using that as part of the school improvement process. So, gathering data from a climate or culture survey and really not doing anything with the data, it doesn't give our employees a voice in the process. So by marrying some of the data with that continuous improvement planning, gives people that voice and drives that employee engagement. In the policy and personnel meeting earlier tonight, I talked about the creation of our staff handbook work group. And historically, the handbook was created by HR in conjunction with union representation for those employee groups at that time. And so what we did is we grew that employee representation to represent different employee groups across the district, across our staff. And so we solicited representation by sending out an email to the entire district. We were looking for diversity for the employee representatives that were sitting in on that group. And really they're acting as an ambassador for their colleagues. So soliciting feedback from them and then bringing it back to the staff handbook work group so we can use their suggestions, feedback on the content that they would like to see in the handbook. And then we had a kickoff meeting about a month ago, talked about really kind of the format in the forum of this process. And then we currently are meeting with the different employee groups right now. We're hoping to have a solid working draft next week. That solid working draft will then go back out to the employee groups so they have an opportunity to provide feedback on the formatting, the content, and then ultimately vetted through legal and Dr. Keyser for approval. So once again, giving employees a voice to the process, also fostering inclusivity and equity, and not only that, but breaking down barriers in the workplace and providing that understanding of like why we do maybe what we do. The ACRES project, that is just a recent partnership with UW-Madison. And so that is a tool or a resource for our staff that have an emergency license in special ed. This allows a teacher to pose questions or interact with peers or UW-Madison faculty to receive professional development that's tailored for their needs and the content that they're teaching. And then our recruitment efforts, you know, when you think of retention, you also think of recruitment as well. Sometimes they really kind of go hand in hand. So what we've been able to do is we're upgrading our recruitment platform from WeCan to Frontline. However, we will run both systems concurrently while we're learning where our candidates are learning about our positions, and we're hoping that our candidates just have a better overall experience, and then that actually goes over into like the whole onboarding experience with our staff as well. We have expanded where we're posting our positions. We're using social media like our careers page on Facebook. We partnered with diversityjobs.com. And then Indeed naturally has been scraping our jobs. But one thing that we're doing better is trying to really determine where people are learning about our positions. WeCan hasn't been robust enough to capture that for us. But manually, we're able to put some things together. We have an active vacancy to recruit for a recruiter, and we're hoping to have somebody in place maybe about the beginning of April. I'm sorry, that's probably, I'm overcommitting to the beginning of April. I'm going to probably say maybe end of April. And that person, we're hoping, like I had mentioned with our pipelines, will be doing some heavy lifting with that project, building relationships in the community, building relationships with our universities, and looking for those opportunities, overturning those stones. Our website and update presentation material. So this is something our marketing and communications team put together for us and really rather quickly. So I want to recognize them for being able to do this for us. When we're doing virtual career fairs, a lot of people want to bring forward resources about the community or what our district really looks like. And so Monica Christofa and her team were really able to create a microsite that provides an overview of the district, our mission, our vision, our values, our diversity info, family testimonies. So, you know, when we're recruiting somebody that's not from this area, those are the tools and resources that we need to put in place so we can, you know, kind of hook them and reel them in a sense. So, and then our career fairs, we're continuing with a virtual format for this year. We had a virtual fair for recruitment of psychologists. Missy Beavers and Eric Weir interviewed many people. So we have one job offer out there. And then we have been using Rock County Job Center and some of their virtual career fairs to recruit for some of our hourly folks. So we continue to recruit for substitutes and substitute paras and crossing guards, and we're trying to build those pools. So ultimately, we have the support for the staff that we have, as well as new positions that we have posted. So those are some of the things that we've been working on in HR, and we're really excited about it.
So I want to take an opportunity to thank the team for going through and providing just an update of where we are in many of the each of the three goals, and to use a visual when you think about the work that continuous improvement is all about. It's kind of like when you're planting a seed. You spend a lot of time just not seeing a whole lot of stuff happening, and then you start to see the little sprout, and then it seems like overnight things take off. Where we are in our process, we know that this is not a quick fix. Nothing in education is, but it is about putting systems and structures in place, and hopefully you have seen through the conversations tonight how each of the departments have to rely on each other's work and their expertise, both for their expertise, but for their interdependency to get our system in our schools and our district to move forward. So with that, I'll open it up for the team to answer any questions the board has.
Thank you very much, Dr. Keiser. It looks like we're going to start with Board Member Levy, and if other board members would like to go next, go ahead and put a chat in the box. I will go through and give everybody an opportunity to ask questions. Thank you very much for that. Board Member Levy, would you get us started, please?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Keiser, to your team for putting this presentation together. I am very excited to hear updates on our short-term goals. With respect to the work that has been done with anti-racism and equity training, how do you envision the professional development translating into student experience?
I wasn't sure if you were answering that, Dr. Keith.
No, I was going to say, Ms. Moratek and I.
Whoever would like to begin the conversation is fine with me.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Levy. Dr. Keiser had an interesting definition of equity when we talked one day, and he said that the system is no longer predictable. And what he meant by that is right now the system that we have has some predictable outcomes that are not desirable, right? Everyone wants a different outcome than what some of those kiddos are having. And so I like that, because I think when we talk about where we are going, what I see, and I'm just going to speak for myself now, is my vision is that we have students that are thriving and students that are able to make choices about what they want to do and where they want to go, and we're there to support that work, and we're there to surface, like I said earlier, the excellence that's already in them. And so when we talk about equity, right, we all know that famous picture of the different heights of people standing on boxes. And so that whole idea is that equality, right, and equity are not the same thing. And equity is giving what a person or a child needs in order to be successful. And so how can we differentiate our levels of support? And then how can we also be intentional about the instructional practices? Another piece that I see our kids going is really having access to high quality materials and resources. And we have we do have that in the school district of Beloit, but there are some areas as we do some standards alignment work that we're recognizing there's an opportunity there to really think about equity and access to high quality materials, and there's some needs there. And so I guess for me personally, those are some of the things I think about when I think about equitable student outcomes.
Thank you so much. My take on equity is I do want those outcomes to be predictable. I just want them to be predictable, positive outcomes. And thank you so much for expanding on equity. I see that anti-racism training is mentioned a few times in the slide deck, which I'm encouraged by. If someone could speak to how that anti-racism training in PD, how you, in a best case scenario, how you would envision that training and work to translate into student experience, that would be great.
For that, I'll turn over to Ms. Elliott, who that certainly can talk about some of the outreach she has done and some of the people that have been working with our schools and our staff this year.
Good evening. So part of our cultural competence and cultural humility that I'm calling a series of bringing in some speakers to kind of put some perspective to the experiences they've had. We had Amanda Goodenough come in to talk about microaggressions and what that looks like and put up some experiences about how that feels. Continuing, we had her for the teachers, and then we brought her back for the paraeducators. We're then continuing with the cultural competence and cultural humility with Mr. Mark Perry and talking about intersectionality and the different areas where those microaggressions do happen in the workplace and in the school. And our hope is that as we get more information about competence and teachers are learning more about culturally responsive practices, that they will start to use those and continue to use those in the classroom and have conversations with coworkers or others who have said things that are insensitive and to kind of call them out on that. As we continue through this, we've had buildings who have made it into their continuous improvement plans to work on cultural responsive practices, and the work that they are doing in buildings are really great. So when we look at professional development, like what are we doing universally for all of our staff, but then how are we supporting our buildings as they are choosing goals related to equity and anti-racism?
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Board Member Levy. Board Member Delgado?
I just want to say thank you so much for this presentation. It really just brings joy listening to all the different efforts that you guys are trying to really implement and go through. Cultural competency is such a big thing, and just having goals, within each individual school, I think it's very, very important. The other thing that just really brought joy to my heart was just knowing that how much our ELL classes have grown and what that means to the students and what that even means to the families, our communities out there that just value that so much. I can tell you, coming from a Latino family and being here in the United States and not speaking the language and just having that available, just knowing that that's available to us students that are not, English speakers, it just amazes me. The other thing that just really I'm very grateful for and thankful that we are trying to keep the native language. See that in homes. Can you still hear me?
You were breaking up there just a little bit, but you're back now.
Yeah, I think I'm losing internet connection for some reason.
We can hear you fine if you want to try to continue.
Okay. The other thing was about retention, just retention on staff in general, but mostly.
Unfortunately, Board Member Delgado, you're right, we lost you. So if you want to jump, I will come back to you. I have a note where you left off on retention here. I don't know if you can hear us or not. I apologize, but we will come back, okay? Thank you for those questions and for bringing that up. So we've heard from Board Member Levy. We are in the midst of hearing from Board Member Delgado. We'll circle back. Board Member Wong, or sorry, Vice President Wong, would you like an opportunity to ask a question or provide a comment?
I'll just echo a lot of what's been said. Actually, I think, it's great that we have these goals to keep us focused. I'll be very excited to see the strategic planning process and going towards that, working towards that in a positive manner. I'm very curious to see how the short-term goals turn out. I guess at the end, I know that we're going to have a climate survey coming up here, or we're in the midst of that now. So I'll be very interested to hear about the retention rate in our district, and then the hiring practices as well. I think that the front line is a great addition to be able to hopefully recruit and look outside of our borders of the Wisconsin border. And the other goals, I think that it's great to see this has been a challenging year for all kids. And I've seen it with my two kiddos and just how they've dealt with it, which they've done, I think, pretty well. But I've definitely seen some changes in the way that they've handled the year. And I know that I've heard it from various families. Some kids are thriving and others are struggling big time. And I think that, to get these kids back in school is essential. And hopefully next year we'll be able to start fresh and have them in here full time. So I guess I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Vice President Wong. Board Member Jacobs?
I echo everything that my colleagues have. Sorry, I muted myself.
You're fine.
Did you hear my part?
We heard that you echo everything your colleagues said.
Yes. And I also want to thank each staff member for such thorough reporting.
Are you still with us, Board Member Jacobs?
Yes, you didn't hear my last part?
We got echo and thank you.
How odd. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
The last part was that last but not least, I wanted to thank each staff member for providing such thorough reporting.
All right, thank you. Did you have a question?
I do not.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So we have heard from Board Members Levy Delgado, Vice President Wong, and Board Member Jacobs. Board Member Anderson?
I just want to say thank you for everyone who took part in this. I'm really happy to see an update on our goals as a district, and I really look forward to getting future updates on these.
Thank you very much, Board Member Anderson. Ms. Shope, did we have another public comment? I thought I saw, were we good? Okay, I thought I saw somebody pull out a pink slip. Okay, so Board Member Delgado, if you are back, if you want to pick up where you left off, I think the last thing we heard from you was you were beginning to comment on retention.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You're fine.
Yeah, just that I'm really glad that, that work group handbook, it's being done to provide some guidance for our current staff that need to either further their education and to get that actual teaching license. I think that that's very much needed. I had heard concerns from staff members where they felt that there was not enough guidance provided to them in order for them to renew that license. So I'm glad that something's being done about that.
Thank you so much, Board Member Delgado, and I'm glad we were able to finish up your comments there. Okay, if nobody has anything else, I did actually have a couple of questions and comments. I do want to thank so much Dr. Kieser and your team for putting this together. It was a fabulous update. I enjoyed reading through it, and I was, I don't know what this says about my personal life, but I was really excited and anticipating hearing your presentation tonight, so thank you so much for that. Couple of thoughts. I was curious if you could provide some context for how we know when things are, I really appreciate the continuous improvement planning piece. And I'm curious if you could provide an example of how do we know when we're doing well when with regard, whether it's to foundational skills or anti-racism or any of the really great topics you touched on. Could you provide an example of kind of those benchmarks?
I could provide an example of benchmarks for literacy and foundational skills. So we had the opportunity to do PALS, the PALS screener, in winter, and now we'll do it at the end of the year. And we had decided to do the winter one because we were unable to do the fall one. And what's nice about the PALS screener is it allows you to, let's say there's like sub-tests, and kids take those different subsets, and you can really narrow down. And in that example, you're teaching for mastery. So I know my letter sounds or letter recognition, blending sounds, writing certain things. And so what's nice about PALS is it gives you that type of data to know the percentage of students that are passing the screeners. And then as a response to that, and when we think about school improvement, the purpose of all assessments is to analyze and adjust what we're doing. And so this screener is nice in the sense that it allows you to adjust your instructional groupings. So I might have some kids in my class that have, by this time in kindergarten, have mastered their letter names, and then I might have some kids that haven't yet. So those are the students then that I'm pulling to do small group explicit instruction. And so I was looking forward to doing the winter, and the staff was really great about accepting that challenge in this environment because it allows us then to go into that small group instruction. And then we'll have that again in spring. So that's a way that we can look at, okay, what's the percentage of students in fall? And we can look back, so it will be apples to oranges, but typically, what's the number of kids that are passing the screener at these different points? And you can look back, sometimes what you'll find out, and I don't know in Beloit because we haven't done a year yet like this, but you'll have a percentage of kids that are passing the screener at the beginning of the year. Those expectations change, and then you may have more or less that are passing the screener at the end of the year. And what we want, right, is essentially we want more students passing the screener at the end of the year. We don't want kids coming in knowing what they needed to know and then a lack of rigor or a lack of adjustment or whatever it is that's happening, and then you have less kids passing a screener. And so that would be an example for early reading foundations.
Thank you. No, that's awesome. And I'm just coming up with questions that I think community members or parents might have. It's not like a pop quiz or anything. I think your presentation was thorough and I really enjoyed it.
Sorry if that was too much.
No, that was, that just made my educator heart glow. That was beautiful. So coming off of that then, could you just if you can think of an example of maybe what is I liked in goal 2 how we talked about developing tier 3 for students. Could you just provide an example of kind of what does tier 3 look like, or what has it looked like with the restraints of the pandemic? Or how, I guess, you had provided, I know, for example, I know you talked about bringing in small groups of students, bringing, for the in-person, for students who are targeted as needing that intervention. Can you just provide maybe just some more context so people know? It's just, we use a lot of teacher talk. I know Vice President Wong usually brings that up. So I just want to make this, just so the community or anybody who's listening really gets what that means.
And I think we can talk with Mr. Weir as well as Ms. Martek and Ms. Rosemaria can all speak to some of the small group interventions.
Yeah, so I can speak to small groups specific to our students with IEPs. So there's definitely been small group targeted skill time with them based upon their individual needs in their IEP that has been occurring, but we've also expanded to some of that tier 3 intervention, particularly though for those students that we say are on a referral pathway. So it's been a student that has been identified by their buildings, that have gone through levels of intervention, but may not be responding the way that people had hoped. And so a referral was made for special education services. And so we're doing some intensive tier 3 interventions to really target in on what deficit areas these students may have so that we can build a plan to best support them going forward.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. No, if anyone else wants to jump in, otherwise we can be good.
No, I really appreciate that. And I guess I just wanted to highlight too, and just, I don't know, I know we can't give high fives and physical distancing, so I just want to give out a high five. I really appreciated hearing the language around assets-based language for our students. And I just wanted to applaud Ms. Larson for really focusing on a great example of what I think reflects culturally sustaining pedagogy with just building on like native language and using that as an asset for our students. I mean, I think some of I'm looking forward to future presentations. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about culturally sustaining pedagogy, youth-adult partnerships, and assets-based assessment, because it really circles around a lot of what I've heard here tonight, and that's just what we know is best for our kids, and I just really wanted to applaud all of you for that, because I feel like I heard common threads of that in everybody's presentation. I thought that one specifically was a great example. So I guess I will stop because it is getting late, but I just have just really want to, again, thank you for the presentation, heard some great stuff, and looking forward to hearing more.
And I just want to say once again, thanks to the team. Thank you for the questions. And to kind of close it out, when sometimes it's hard to describe all of the things that we're trying to accomplish, but it all gets encapsulated in a great story. And the best story that we can talk about of where we want to go in our vision is the video that we saw at our last board meeting. When we think about Beyond Now, we think about that 2-minute video clip, and that's what we're trying to build.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for sharing your time with us this evening. At this time, we are on to topic item 5, which are the reports. I know Ms. Shope is going to read for us our student board member, Mr. Wong's report. And then I think at some point, I think our reports are getting uploaded onto board docs. So, or they're there already. I just didn't refresh my screen. I apologize. All right, go ahead, Ms. Shope.
So this report was submitted by Kana Wong. Good evening. This past month, I've conducted another student survey. This month's survey gained 415 responses, which is slightly less than the surveys I've done in the past, but is still a decent sample size. As has been with the last 4 surveys, the freshman and junior classes are slightly overrepresented, but with the questions I asked, I wouldn't imagine the grade level had an overwhelming impact on the results shown. The results were also a lot more neutral than I would have anticipated, and because of that, there's only a couple of pieces of relevant information that I have to share. The first of these is that overall, students' attention for their online classes has decreased quite a bit from this fall and early winter. Approximately 16% of the students who responded claimed that they were fully awake and paying attention in class, while 56%, a little more than half of our respondents, claimed to be multitasking. This leaves over a quarter of the students who responded in categories ranging from I'm paying more attention to something else than I am to my classes to I don't go to classes most days. Keep in mind that there is likely quite a bit of non-response bias in the answers to these questions as well. Hopefully, students' return to school will help increase the engagement of some more of our kids. My next big survey question was asking about students understanding the 4th term plans. 20% of the students who responded claimed that they know what's going on. Luckily, a further 50% think that they know what the plan might look like, but that leaves 30% of our respondents who don't. Again, keep in mind that there is likely quite a bit of non-response bias. Finally, some students had mentioned credit recovery in the comments, questions, concerns form. While I didn't originally think to include anything about this topic in my survey, I do think that it's something that should be talked about if it isn't already. We know that there are many kids who've struggled a lot more than usual this year. Are there plans in place for students who have not come to school all year or have failed core classes? Secondly, with graduation only a couple of months away, is there a plan in place for the seniors who have not completed the graduation requirements? These are a couple of topics that students had brought up, and seeing as they'll have a pretty big impact on some of our students, I thought I'd bring them up tonight. That's all I've got for you this month. Just to reiterate the important point, the key takeaway from this month's report should be that many students have been checking out over this past year, now more than ever, and that they need to know what their options will be moving forward, both for credit recovery and graduation requirements. Thank you for listening. Kana Wong, Student Board Representative.
Thank you so much. These are so informative and so important. We really appreciate you doing this for us, Mr. Wong. At this time, I want to jump over to reports. Ms. Jacobs, did you submit a report that I didn't pass along? Otherwise,
I was remiss. I am ready to give a brief report, however.
No, you're fine. Okay.
If you'd like,
you're
or
fine.
I could just include it. Go ahead.
No, I think I just was talking over you. I apologize. I was just saying, please go ahead.
Okay. So on March 9th, we've been very busy with our Policy and Personnel Committee. We approved the employment recs to the full board for approval with the exception of the head football coach, with the understanding that the committee would look at comparable salaries from other districts' coaches. That was to be presented today. And under policies for first reading, we sent policy 723.41, school opening/reopening during a public health crisis, to the full board with revisions. We decided to postpone policy 522.6, employee anti-harassment, until the Cambria group could review and make recommendations. And policies 522.8, 523.2, 662.3, 672, and 672.1 were postponed until the next meeting due to time constraints. And then February 23rd, can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. February 23rd, we approved employment recs to the full board for approval. Policies for first reading, we approved policy 522.5, participation in community and life and political activities by staff with no revisions. Policy 522.71, social media guidelines for staff, and policy 523.1, employee physical exams, and 522.4, staff code of ethics, to the full board with revisions, and policy 447.1, use of seclusion and physical restraint, to the full board with updated revisions to the full board for approval. And then policy 523.2, employees occupationally exposed to blood-borne pathogens, and 522.8, dress code for district employees, was not discussed and moved to the next meeting. And as I said, we've been very busy, and that is my report. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Anybody else who wants to read reports, anybody who's viewing or any folks at home, they are posted. Board Member Levy, did you have anything you wanted to highlight for the legislative update that was posted?
Just very briefly, I'm using the same format that I did last month, but anything that you see with an asterisk, and there's also a little note on the report, that means that it has been in committee for at least a month. So it's a carryover. So asterisk items have been in committee for a little bit longer, and then I just went in numerical order to put new information that is up, but it's the same format. Hopefully people are finding that helpful, and I also included all of the CRs and executive appointments as well with a brief description. You can always use that link at the top if there is additional information that you want to know about items that are in either the Assembly or the Senate calendar. Our representatives are also listed, and then if there is a specific item that's listed and you want to know who to contact, the representative that is the main author of that item is also listed as well.
Thank you so much for taking the time to put that together, and thank you to all of our committee chairs for your reports this evening. At this time, we are moving to Category 6, our action item for this evening, which is the 2021 graduation plans. And so I'll turn it over to Ms. Pells, our principal.
Good evening, and thank you for having me tonight. I also have Mr. Joel Beard as a co-presenter. There, I see him pop on. And so we are very excited and pleased to present to you tonight our proposed graduation plan for 2021. We will take all questions at the very end of the presentation, please. Okay, so we actually have been very busy thinking about graduation and what it could be like and what would be a great plan for our students. Our goal is to provide an option for graduation that first and foremost is safe, but also meets our graduates' personal needs and desires. We did send a survey out to our students and our parents asking their opinion around how they feel about an in-person type of an option. Well, first of all, let me back up just a little bit. In working with our senior class officers, it came to fruition that they really preferred an in-person type of option and worked with parameters around how we could safely do that. The senior class officer sent a survey out to the senior class, and overwhelmingly, that was the feedback that we got, is that students would like an opportunity to be in person, to experience that milestone of their life with their graduating class together and have the opportunity to walk the stage. When we surveyed parents, parents too provided feedback in which that they were overwhelmingly supportive of an in-person type of option. And so what we then wanted to do was take into consideration everybody's needs and desires, because some people are not quite comfortable with an in-person option yet. And so what we came to the conclusion of was a hybrid model for graduation that would incorporate an in-person opportunity and a virtual opportunity for students and families, in which students could be essentially simulcasted into an in-person type of graduation. Kind of like what we're doing in this board meeting right now. There's some people live in the boardroom, some people on the screen, and we're all coming together for the same event. Next slide, please. And so, considering that we are currently in phase 2 of the Rock County Reopening Phase Plan, we do feel confident that we would be able to accommodate a hybrid graduation in which we would strictly adhere to physical distancing, put safety measures in place, and adhere to a 50% capacity of our venue. We absolutely would be adhering to all of the CDC guidelines on large gatherings and social distancing. And then we would also make sure to consult with the DHS and DPI guidance, which is not currently up yet for 2021, but it will be coming soon. Next slide, please. Okay. So a hybrid graduation would consist of an opportunity for students to meet in person or through Google Meet. The venue for the in-person option would be Jacobson Field. There would be COVID mitigation safety protocols and procedures in place so that we would ensure the safety of all. Again, having a hybrid option provides an opportunity to meet both needs of students who want to be in person and students who want to remain virtual. Another aspect that we would have in place is that guests would be able to attend via live stream through YouTube as well as staff. And then we would also have additional digital content like the band and the choir. Okay, so the next series of slides goes through the safety protocols that we would make sure that are in place. And so I will kind of just summarize some of these so that I don't have to read all of them out, because you, I'm sure, are reading along with me. But in general, that we would limit the capacity to 50%. That's what the guidance is right now. So we would make sure we would be adhering to that. There would be no indoor opportunity for the gathering to take place. So typically, in graduation, if we by chance had poor weather, historically the graduation ceremony would move inside. We would not have that option. We would have a rain dates in place to make sure that we can make sure that it stays outside. We would maintain social distancing. Definitely have some limited movement around the stadium. So, you know, we wouldn't be offering concessions and things like that. We would make sure that the seating that is available in Jacobson Field is clearly marked so that people know and see where physical or social distancing, that 6 feet spacing is in between seats and the rows. And then we would also have visual markers around so that that could help with the denoting of the social distancing. Next slide, please. Graduates would arrive at staggered times, and they would report directly to where our graduation practice would take place before, which is practice field across the street from Jacobson Field. Again, with the graduates, their seats are all socially distanced from one another. We would make sure that there's adequate time for the gates to open so that guests could also come in a staggered fashion, so that everybody isn't arriving at one time. And then each guest would be presented a ticket when they arrive so that there's controlled numbers of people who come in as the people who are watching. All graduates would be required to complete the screener prior to arriving as well. And these are a lot of our normal safety protocols that we currently have in place. So continuing on with safety protocols, everybody would be required to wear masks at all times. We would have masks available if somebody were to arrive without one. Sanitizing stations would be located prominently around Jacobson Field so that there is easy access to sanitizing. And then additional measures there, you know, we wouldn't have handshaking going on as students cross the stage. And students would be required to pick up their own diploma when they came upon the stage, as opposed to us handing it to them.
Okay, so supervision for our safety protocols, we're working with our security here in Ryan and our local law enforcement with our SRO with Terry Hanneman. Will represent to assist with gathering and crowd control. So we'll make a few changes to what we've already been doing in the past just to accommodate that. A security guard will be stationed at the entrance of the restrooms to manage the number of guests accessing the restroom at one time. Guests will be dismissed from the stadium first at the end, and then the graduates will remain in their seats until the guests have all exited. Once that's happened, the graduates will be dismissed by rows, and they can meet up with their families after that. The field setup. Well, the field setup is 160 feet wide and 330 feet long. So we'll separate each chair 6 feet in front, 6 feet behind, 6 feet to the left, 6 feet to the right. If we do that, we could accommodate 25 seats in a row, and then we would have 18 rows of 25 seats. That would cover roughly about half the field, so we should have plenty enough room to add more if we need to to accommodate the number of graduates. One change that we will make to this year's graduation, instead of facing the north, which would be away from the scoreboard, we will be facing the south towards the scoreboard so that we could incorporate the scoreboard into the graduation with our digital content, with the band and choir and all those things. So we'll make that adjustment with the field setup. Whoops. What you'll see here is just a little picture of that setup. The scoreboard is to the right of the screen with the stage right there, approximately in the end zone there of the football field, and our seats will be spaced accordingly on the football field. There will be no rows going down the middle, so we'll all go in one direction. So we'll try to limit the amount of crossing within the rows. We'll go across the stage, come back down, and we'll all be following the same direction. The timeline for the day, June 5th, sorry about that. Students arrive at 8 o'clock. The gates will open at 8 o'clock, and we will start graduation at our normal time of 10 o'clock. The rain dates mentioned by Ms. Pels earlier, the first rain date would be June 6th, and the second rain date would be June 12th. The reason there's a big gap in between, there's a lot of spring sport activities that are occurring during the week that will force some students to possibly make adjustments or decisions of either to play the game that they've missed out on, or especially from last spring to this spring, or go to graduation. So to avoid those conflicts, the second rain date would be June 12th at the same time. Communication for the event. Event information and expectations will be communicated clearly, prominently, and consistently well in advance of the event and during the event. We have some posters that we can put up around the facility and things that we can provide the families with beforehand so that they have a pretty good idea of, or a very good idea of what is expected when they show up for graduation. The next steps will be to continue to monitor Rock County, DHS, and the CDC guidelines, continue with planning and preparation steps, making adjustments in the model as necessary based off those guidelines, and provide the communication to families and the community. And that is our presentation. We are open for questions.
Thank you so much for the fabulous presentation that you put together. At this time, board members, if you want to put a question mark in the chat, now would be a great time to do so. All right, Board Member Anderson, please.
First off, I want to say thank you very much for all the thought and consideration that you guys put in this. I think it's a great opportunity for the kids to kind of enjoy the last bit of their senior year. So my first question is if you guys get a large number of seniors that are like, I want to attend in person, what's the maximum number of students can you actually have on the field in preparation for that?
According to my math, Mr. Anderson, we could accommodate a lot of students on that field that we'd have more than enough space on the field to do that. We could double it and we'd be fine.
Great. That was my biggest concern because I want to make sure every kid has that opportunity to attend it because it is something that everyone would love to do.
The numbers of the 25 rows or 25 seats of 18 rows of 25 seats will come out to about 450 students. So there will be an addition of, I think our last number was 491. So we could easily add 40 more seats if that is necessary.
Thank you so much. Board Member Levy?
All right, I have several questions, so I'll just squeeze in a couple, and then hopefully we'll do round robin. You mentioned a screener before people come. I believe that like when our students return to school, they're going to use their ID and scan it, and that confirms that their screener was done. how will we do that for guests? Is there like something through our app where they can have? Is there like a paper one? If people don't have that technology, how will that be handled?
So currently there is a screener that is accessible through a Google form that we typically use if we have to have somebody come into the building. If somebody doesn't have technology, we can always offer a screener on paper.
Perfect. And then the second question that I will squeeze in, has there been consideration made for family seating? So one, I'm not sure how many tickets each graduate will have in order for us not to exceed capacity at 60%. But let's say that there's a family of 4, they wouldn't have to be 6 feet apart. They would just have to be 6 feet apart from other families or groupings. And Tasha Bell had a wonderful idea. I don't know if this went into the thought process of having graduation at Strong Stadium or with Telfair Park. So you could do that numbered seating, which may be easier than kind of trying to manually section off the bleachers. Did that play a role in your formulation of this plan? And how will grouping work with seating?
Okay, I will take the location question, I guess. Yes, we definitely took into account of looking at Telfair and Strong Stadium, reached out to both organizations and had communications with them. At the end of the day, where we are and the uncertainty that this COVID situation has come or is bringing us, we decided that Jacobson Field is the best for us right now because of the familiarity and understanding that we can troubleshoot pretty much anything that could happen on graduation day and still have things go off smoothly. And there's just familiarity with Jacobson right now. And the availability of the other locations were still in question right now if they were going to be possible. And with the timing of things, we really need to get graduation planned and moving forward so that we're ready for June 5th.
And then in regards to the grouping of guests that come, how we have planned it out is that there would be visual decals on the bleachers where families would be able to sit. And so when we were determining our numbers, we did that conservatively. So I agree, Amy, that yes, a family could sit together, but we did space each individual seat out to social distance, just to make sure that we were able to effectively social distance everyone in the stadium. Our goal would be to have each graduate have 2 guests. We wouldn't be able to go over 2 guests and maintain that 50% capacity. That wouldn't be possible.
Okay, so then the grouping might be a moot point if each graduate has 2 guests. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other board members with questions, comments, or feedback at this time? Seeing none. Board Member Levy, did you have any additional comments or questions?
I do have one other that hasn't been addressed. I appreciate that there will be someone kind of helping with the restrooms. Is there a plan in place for cleaning the facilities throughout the programming?
And Joel, maybe you want to jump in on this too, but we would work with our Aramark staff on disinfecting and cleaning in general procedures for that day, before, during, and after.
Perfect. And then I'm just curious, because I'm not aware of the answer to this. I know that there are physical distancing requirements with people who are sitting together, but what about parking? And I'm sure that has been thought out, but there is a plan for people to park and distance, and because I know as much as you try to stagger it after graduation, I'm sure there may be somewhat of a flood to get back to the next location. So what do the plans for parking look like?
Do you want me to answer that one?
Either or.
Okay. The plan, we have handicap parking available just south of the stadium, so we do have that. But our parking lot should be big enough for us to social distance if we need to with our cars. But the parking issue would be something that I would talk to Ryan and make sure that if we need more security for that, to make sure, or if we need to park cars ourselves, you know, like at a baseball game or something like that, we direct the cars where we want them to park so we can control that. So I don't have an exact answer for that, and if Ms. Pels has a better answer, she can chime in. But that would be something that I would work with security to make sure that our parking is where it needs to be with social distancing and the people arriving and what time. So we'll have to pull in those resources if need to.
Yeah, I was going to say that we have the security staff to direct parking when guests arrive, and students are going to be assigned a staggered time to arrive, and so guests will likely arrive at staggered times as well, because a lot of times the student would come with their, guest or their family. And so that will help the flow of traffic into the parking lot and the parking situation. And then at the end of the ceremony, the guests will be released from the stadium first, and then graduates will be dismissed according to row after the stadium has cleared. So again, that will help alleviate the number of people who are sort of grouping in one area.
Perfect. And then my final question is, it said in your presentation that staff may attend via live stream. Does that mean that staff may not attend in person? I know that's such a huge part of the ceremony, to see that teacher or teachers that help you get through or just really inspired you. So I would love to know if staff, if they're comfortable, would be able to attend in person.
So when we did our planning, we did plan that staff would attend through a live stream, because we were prioritizing the capacity of the stadium to the students and their guests that they would bring, unfortunately. I agree, though. I mean, we would love to have everybody there. It's just very difficult when we're, operating under restrictions, and we want to make sure that we adhere to those guidelines as strictly as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Beard and Ms. Pels. Does anybody else have any questions before we move on? All right, if not, so again, thank you. At this time, I would entertain a motion.
What is the request?
I believe, but please jump in if I'm incorrect, that we are looking for a motion to approve the 2021 graduation plans as presented this evening.
Yes.
So moved.
I believe that was, I believe the tiebreaker went to Board Member Jacobs, who made a motion to approve the 2021 graduation plans as presented this evening, with a second by Board Member Delgado. Is that correct? Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion on the table? Go ahead. Please go ahead, Board Member Delgado.
If things get better before graduation day, is there any possibility that maybe, we can allow teachers to come in, or maybe we can allow more guests? I mean, depending on how things look, is there a possibility to maybe open it up a little bit more or more public?
I think it would depend on what the guidelines are from the Wright County Health Department, from the CDC. Right now, that 50% capacity is the recommendation coming directly from them that we're operating under.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, Board Member Delgado. Are there any other questions, comments, or thoughts before we proceed to a vote? Hearing none. There's a motion on the table. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you again for all the staff involved and for those who presented this evening.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. All right, moving on then to our consent agenda. We approved our agenda this evening with items A, B, C, D, E, F, M, N, O, and P. Oh, I guess O, sorry about that. Is there anybody who would like to remove any of those items from the consent agenda at this time? Hearing none, I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda without items G through L.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have unanimously passed our consent agenda. Before we proceed to the next item, I just want to let folks know, anybody who's watching at home, we are about to go into executive session, which means we're going to be ending the live television broadcast for this evening. However, the plan is to come back into open session at the conclusion of our closed session. This footage we worked out ahead of time will be available on YouTube. It'll be spliced in, so you won't have to wait however long it takes for our closed session to go. And it sounds like they're going to need until by the end of the day tomorrow, which is Wednesday, March 24th. So just a heads up, if you're watching at home and you want to see the conclusion of the meeting, it will be available on our YouTube channel by the end of the day, Wednesday, March 24th. And if there are any updates to that, I'm sure our fabulous website staff will do a great job letting us know. Do board members have any questions about that before we proceed to item 8? Hearing none, at this time, I would accept a motion to go into executive session.
I will move to convene the Board of Education into closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C, relative to considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Section 19.85's Parent 1, Parent E, relative to deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, and Section 19.85, Parent 1, Parent G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to go into executive session. Is there any discussion? All right. Ms. Shope, if we could please get a roll call vote. Thank you.
Wong,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
Delgado,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Jacobs,
Aye.
and Miller.
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right, thank you. And just thanks again to all of our staff for joining us this evening. We really appreciate all of your input, and we will reconvene into open session after executive session. Thank you all.